Hello and welcome to the Tuesday, February 23rd meeting of the Finance Committee. Pursuant to the Governor's order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, General Laws, Chapter 38, Paragraph 20, as well as the Select Board's emergency order dated March 16th, 2020, the Finance Committee and the Governance Committee in a joint meeting will be using remote participation for this meeting. The audio of this meeting is being recorded and will be posted to the town's webpage within 24 hours in accordance with the Governor's emergency action requirement of keeping the public informed of actions during this meeting. I would ask that all participants remotely attending this meeting please state your name for identification purposes each time you speak throughout the meeting. At this time, I will take a roll call of the Finance Committee. Mr. Maxwell.
Here.
Ms. Zemer.
Here.
Mr. Alfred.
Present.
Mr. Whitaker.
Here.
Mr. Murphy. Okay, you're on mute, Mr. Murphy.
Here.
Okay, Ms. Nersessian.
Here.
Okay, so we're in session. I will do very quickly. The question to the Finance Committee is, did everybody get a chance to review our last minutes? And do we want, if we're okay, do we want to move to approval? If so, somebody can make the motion.
I have not had a chance to look at them, but I'm fine. But I don't know what date is it, the minutes of?
It would be the 9th, February 9th.
Right, so move to approve the minutes of February 9th.
Second.
Okay, any further discussion on that? Let's proceed to a vote. Mr. Maxwell.
Yes.
Ms. Zemer.
Yes.
Mr. Alfred.
Yes.
Mr. Whitaker.
Yes.
Mr. Murphy.
Yes.
Ms. Nersessian.
I'm going to abstain because I have not had a chance to review them.
Okay, and I will vote yes, because I did have a chance to review them. Okay, so have that. Now, our first hour tonight is going to be a discussion with the Governance Committee. They're soliciting feedback on the proposal that was sent to all of you last week. In the interest of time, I budgeted an hour for this. We have other budget reviews to get to. And so what I would like, and I don't see Sam here yet, but he had asked to...
Oh, sorry. This is Christina. I'm on the phone with Sam trying to get him into the meeting. I sent him 2 links, so hopefully he's here soon. He's on.
Okay. Because what I was going to say and what my plan was to allow the Governance Committee to do a quick intro. Sam had mentioned he wanted to make some kind of quick opening remarks, but I want to reserve the bulk of the hour for collection of feedback, right? So I don't know if someone wants to step in for Sam to open it up, but I said he'd have 5 minutes to go over whatever you guys wanted to say, and then we'll start letting the Finance Committee, I think there are a lot of questions that I think will be coming your way. So does one of you want to make something, or you want to just get into the feedback right now because Sam's not here?
Hey, Ken, it's Scott McKechnie. We haven't even taken roll call or anything else, so I think we'd wait for Sam anyway.
Okay, well, do you have a vice chair of your committee?
That's me. I don't have the words in front, so I can't read it. So
well, you don't need to read I read the words. I covered you with the words I said, so you're covered on that. All you have to do is take the attendance roll.
Yeah, we still need Sam to be attendant because I think that's the proper thing to do. So we'll just give him another minute.
Okay.
Tina, you said you were able to reach him?
Yeah, I have him on the phone, and I sent him a link, but he was having trouble getting into the Zoom room.
I don't even see anybody in the waiting room or anything like that. So we've been using the same link for a year, so it should work. And I think it may even be one of the links you guys use.
Well, it's on your agenda, so it's easy to find it that way. That's how we have it too.
Yeah, the link in the agenda doesn't work to click on. You have to copy and paste it. I just tried to send it by email as well, so we'll see if...
No, why?
We all got here, so,
Yeah, no, I know. I'm just, but that... So I want to keep us on schedule, so that's... okay.
There he is.
Okay, Sam, whenever you're ready, we're waiting for you, so...
You're on mute, Sam.
Here we go.
I've got a hand that keeps.
We can hear you.
Yep, we can hear you, Sam. So
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay,
So Sam, we need just a roll call that,
right.
as Ken already read the intro, to bring this meeting to a formal meeting. So you want to take a roll call?
Yes, we're a little less formal than the Finance Committee, so I'll start with Len,
Present.
Paul,
Paul, you're on mute.
Present.
Tina,
Present.
Scott,
Present?
and Sam, present.
Okay, so Sam, you said you wanted to, if you have some opening remarks, feel free to make them. As I said, I'm going to keep them to 5 minutes so we have time for feedback,
Right.
especially now we're already delayed. So go ahead.
I just wanted to begin by saying that just a little introduction to the governance committee in terms of, we were established to assist in the development of townwide policies that relate to governance and to recommend changes to the form of government if needed. We consist of 5 members, 5 residents with diverse professional and backgrounds and prior experience in town of Holliston government. Our term is for 3 years. Collectively, we represent over 100 years of municipal experience. Each member volunteered for this committee and was appointed by the select board with no preconditions. Each has demonstrated a high level of integrity, both in their professional and public work. In August, the committee voted that a new town bylaw outlining the budget development process in Holliston should be our first initiative. I think this decision was based on 3 factors. First was the committee's extensive review of charters and bylaws of scores of other towns in Massachusetts and discussions with other town managers, town administrators. Second was the hiring of a new town administrator with direct experience in municipal finance in 2 other towns, working with Holliston's experienced financial officers. And third, the current Holliston bylaws are silent on this topic of budget development, which has led to some tension among some boards, committees, and management or department officials. The governance committee is proposing a new budget development bylaw with related modifications in 3 other articles. Why did we make these recommendations that you have before you? The town of Holliston has not undertaken a comprehensive review of its government structure and efficiency for over 40 years. In that time, local government has become more challenging, more demanding, requiring greater efficiency to meet service demands and changing conditions within limited revenue growth. Increased professionalism in town management and related structural changes have been the response by many other Massachusetts towns in recent years. We have seen what other comparable towns have done to meet these challenges by reviewing, again, scores of bylaws and charters and developing close ties to town managers and town administrators in other towns in Massachusetts. So the bottom line is that based on these factors, we are recommending placing greater responsibility for budget development on the full-time town administrator and his financial team, while relying on the Finance Committee for its independent and robust review of the budget and warrant articles and its recommendations with explanations. We recognize that the previous town administrator was not actively engaged in financial management issues, which created a void that the Finance Committee stepped in to fill with much success, and we are grateful for your greater involvement. However,
1 minute, Sam, just to let you know.
the town would be better served if the development of the budget would be the responsibility of the full-time town administrator, and that the Finance Committee would then be able to focus its energy on its important role of providing an independent review of the operating and capital budgets and developing its recommendations with explanations, and of course, continuing its review of all warrant articles. We would expect that the collaboration between the Finance Committee and the town administrator would continue in fulfilling their respective budget roles. So the purpose of this meeting, we've had one set of meetings with you. The purpose of this meeting is to hear the reaction of the members of the Finance Committee and your comments regarding what we recommended and suggested changes if you have any. And after we finish the series of meetings with town officials, we'll review what we've heard and decide whether it warrants making any other recommendations to what we have submitted already. So that's
Okay.
the opening comments, which.
Okay. So for the Finance Committee's, for the way I'm going to handle this is raise your hand if you'd like to provide some feedback. I'm guessing several of you probably have feedback. I know Dan has obviously raised his hand already. I'm going to try to reserve any comments I have till later to give you guys the opportunity to provide any feedback. So we'll start with Dan. Let's make sure that we handle everything we need to handle tonight. But I will tell you, I'm going to keep close tabs on the time. So if we start getting down a rat's nest of something, we'll move on. So go ahead, Mr. Alfred, you can begin.
Well, thank you guys for being here and for volunteering to do this. And I know you've met a number of times and put in a lot of work and spent a lot of time outside of the public meetings. So really do appreciate all of that. I was told once to start out with something positive. So I'm going to do that. And then we'll get into some of the other things that I may disagree with a little bit. I would like to start by saying that I think that the reorganization of the capital article is a pretty solid, pretty good idea. That you were pretty inclusive with the group that you included in there. I think that will be helpful in certainly bringing Travis or the town administrator as the position in to be more involved, and that certainly will help us with long-term planning. And so I want to sort of commend that section of it. One thing I would say though is that there are a number of groups that aren't represented in there that I think that should be included in some way, either as non-voting members or something like that. And specifically, I'm talking about or independently elected boards that have assets and regular capital requests, such as like the library or the Parks Commission. That's just they just don't have a seat at the table, and I think that given especially the library owns a building, the park, there's a lot of other things, just it may be worth at least, if not including them as a voting member, just adding them. I'll get into the the sort of the timing of capital later, but that's something that I think can probably be sort of dealt with. The other thing I'd add is the talent bank. I think is an exceptional idea. I hope the town, the residents of the town utilize it. But certainly if we can get that utilized, I think that could be a very sort of beneficial thing as we look for people to volunteer for different positions in towns where we always are. Let's see. So getting on to some other things. I guess an overarching question I have is that you stated a number of times during your opening that you were looking to give the town administrator some more responsibility. And my question to you is, and this is, Travis, I just want you to understand that everything I'm saying here is not a reflection on you personally. This is more the position of town administrator and how it's set up in Holliston. I just want to get that out there. I think you're doing an exceptional job. But do you believe that the town administrator position in Holliston is a independent position from the select board?
Well, I would answer that by saying if you put it in a corporate setting, the town administrator is the chief executive officer, responsible for the day-to-day operations of, in this case, the town, and the select board is more like the board of directors, responsible for policy and evaluating the CFO. But
so I would.
He's appointed by the select board, but he still plays, a separate role in terms of day-to-day management that the select board doesn't.
In fact, I would strongly, though politely, disagree with you on that. I do not believe that the town administrator in Holliston is a chief executive officer. I believe a town manager and maybe in some forms of government, a strong town administrator, not strong meaning strong or weak is in the quality of the town administrator, but I mean the form of government. The select board in Holliston is the executive authority in the town. The select board in Holliston is the CEO. In fact, the chair of the select board is the executive officer of the town, and they sign things as such. And that by giving the town administrator, the way that we've done this, the power, you were essentially simply giving the select board that authority via the select board's ability to overrule the town administrator or otherwise make it known that they want the town administrator to do something. It is not the case that the town administrator in Holliston, I would posit, is the chief executive officer of the town. And that, to me, is one of the big issues, aside from a bunch of other issues, with the way that you've gone about setting these things up. So getting into some other questions, and we'll sort of get back to that. When you went about, you provided a nice matrix of the different towns. I looked this over, and one thing that I was kind of struck by was that there really isn't any kind of like uniform approach to this. That basically every town has their own kind of quirks and own sort of way of doing things. And you know, that to me speaks to the fact that there's just a lot of different ways of doing things, and that, you know, there's not necessarily a right way or a wrong way. It's sort of what works for a town, and that if we're going to go and start trying to model ourselves on other towns, I think that's something to keep in mind. So one thing you did talk about a lot is that a lot of towns have bylaws, budgetary, budget process bylaws. And you talk about that, but I was a little surprised that wasn't one of the items on here. Could you supply us either now or later with which of these 15 towns have a budget bylaw?
First of all, it's not a bylaw. These towns basically have charters, and it's in their charter is the fiscal procedures article, which lays out the budget development process. So, I mean, you have the table that has the towns. It's easy enough to just go look for their charter, which is what we've done for.
Well, I'm asking you as the people that have done all this work. I mean, that's your job. You're the governance committee that's making this recommendation, not mine. So do you have a list of those that have a budget process either in their charter or a bylaw?
We have a list of 15 towns that we're using as comparable towns that all have every single one of these towns has a bylaw process or a budgetary process in their charter or bylaw. They do.
Okay, maybe you could send me a couple of those examples.
Sure.
Of these 15 towns, which of them have appointed and which of them have elected finance committees?
I don't think any of them had elected finance committees because, as you know, elected is mainly a small percentage of the total number of finance committees in the state.
Sure, but I actually think that's
most of them are appointed finance committees.
But I actually think that's very, very important, because I think it speaks to what the town of Holliston expects from its finance committee members. That the town of Holliston has chosen to have elected finance committee members for their independence, for their oversight, for their involvement in the budgetary process. I mean, there's no, if you have an appointed finance committee, of course, it's going to be much more sort of centered around the select board and the town administrator or town manager. But we have an independent finance committee that is elected by the people of Holliston to be their oversight in their eyes and ears. And so that really sets us apart from the rest of the towns. So anyway, I'm going to move on.
I don't agree that how you're selected makes a difference as to how the town finance committee.
Sam, we don't need to get into an argument about this, but how you're selected.
I don't agree with that.
Hold on a second. How you're selected is 100% about how you're doing it. If you were chosen by the people, hold on a second, Sam. If you were chosen by the same people that are then giving you by the select board or by the town moderator, that is completely different than if you're elected by the people of Holliston. If I report to the people of Holliston, I'm responsible to the people of Holliston. If the select board appointed me, I'm responsible to them. That makes the world of difference. No, okay, we're gonna move on. I'm sorry,
I've heard this argument too many times and too many.
We're gonna move on.
It's not valid here.
So
I believe it is.
Well, let's move on. Move forward.
Did you model your draft recommendations on any one particular town? Or
No.
Okay.
It was a number of different towns, different sections. As you go through charters or bylaws, you realize that there's a simple language for many of these towns that do outline their.
In the interest of time, we'll just keep going. You do have a finance or sort of a financial indicator spreadsheet, but I'm curious, did you do any sort of more financial analysis of the towns on here? I mean, are they funding their OPEB? What's been their average increase in their tax bills? Do they have any other unique factors that may be contributing to their success one way or the other? Have they pointed to the fact that there are any particular aspects of the process that they think maybe meeting their success? And then most importantly, I'd be curious which of these towns, if any, over the last year had to do budget, headcount, or hour reductions. And what I'm getting to is that I think that one of the things that we've been had really good experience with in Holliston with the way things have largely been set up. And I don't mean to say that there shouldn't be some improvements. The capital article is one of them. But sometimes the outcome is a really good indicator of whether you have a good system or not. You can always look for ways to improve it. But this what you propose isn't a small change. It is a pretty dramatic overhaul. And so I would hope, and I doubt you have this exact information, and I'd be happy to send you these questions, and you can either choose to look into them or not. But I think that some of that might be sort of important to know.
I can tell you that we did get some financial indicators for these towns. All are AA or AAA towns, with the exception of one who's A+, but had good lawyers because their bylaws and their charters were excellent. So these are all well-managed towns based on their bond ratings. Other factors, we have. I believe it's on our website.
But a good bond rating doesn't necessarily mean that they've done a good job prudently spending taxpayer dollars. I mean, so anyway, that was what I was trying to get at. But during this process, did you informally or some way, have discussions with residents of Holliston to see if they thought that the way that the government and the budget was being developed, needed updating or needed changing?
That's to come. I mean, we've basically.
So you went under and did all of this work before finding out if people actually wanted the changes?
Well, we do plan to have public hearings. We will reach out to people in a number of different ways, or residents in a number of different ways. But we needed to understand, frankly, the situation as to other towns and what we might recommend and put this together. This is the whole point of this series of meetings, to have discussions starting with town officials, but other resident groups, and hear from them in terms of what we then make as a final recommendation.
Right. I guess I thought that there's going to be a little bit more back and forth along the way, just to sort of maybe, give you more input as you looked at certain things, a specific being, capital in the fall or the spring. So anyway, one particularly troublesome area was was section 7, lines 5 and 6 that you deleted and claimed that they were unenforceable, and suggested that the finance committee might actually delay its report or otherwise not provide a recommendation. I actually think that lines 5 or 6 is maybe one of the most important pieces of our bylaws currently. Because what it does is it requires the finance committee to make a recommendation on any financially related warrant article before it can become, go into effect, even through a vote of town meeting. And what's important here is it's not a favorable recommendation. Nowhere in here does it say that the finance committee needs to give a favorable recommendation. Nowhere does it say that it impedes the ability of the select board to put anything on the warrant that it wants. It is certainly not in any way taking away from the power of the select board. It simply says that the finance committee needs to provide a recommendation, meaning it needs to be given information and provided all the work that needs to be done so that it can make a recommendation. Nor does it actually say that making a recommendation to make a recommendation at town meeting wouldn't necessarily satisfy the goal here. but that simply that the finance committee cannot be essentially worked, driven around during the process, which is by what you've done, open the door to allow the select board to late in the process put a warrant article on the warrant, because again, they're the only ones that have the ability to open and close the warrant if they want, up to the date that legally it needs to be posted, and put something on the warrant that has not been seen or looked at by the finance committee. And I think that it is a very dangerous change that I would strongly urge you to reconsider. In no way is the way that it's written now unenforceable. It simply says that we don't provide a recommendation. And look, you can provide a recommendation in good faith. I don't care what you said. We have never not provided a recommendation. So I'm not sure where this sort of concern has come from. We always operate in good faith, and the residents and voters of Holliston would run us out if we ever started playing those kind of games. But just as you claim that those games could be possible on our part, I would argue that it is more likely that actually they could be played on from the other side. So,
well, I mean, we were thinking that basically the select board would be honorable as well, and that they approve, as you know, the warrant, and then the warrant goes directly to the finance committee, so that there would be no situation where the finance committee really wouldn't have the information in the warrant. And it would, that would give otherwise the finance committee a veto over warrant articles that it didn't report on, and so that's.
Well, Sam, I'll just interject here and say that's a ridiculous argument. The bylaw states that we have to make a report 7 days ahead of town meeting, so that report must include recommendations on the articles. So the idea that we would not make a recommendation, I'm with Dan on this, the idea that we wouldn't make a recommendation to somehow hold up the warrant is patently false. And in fact, I will just interject quickly that the only time that the recommendation of the finance committee, in my knowledge, has been suppressed was when a member of the select board moved for that to happen last July. So I think it's really, I agree with Dan, it's a very dangerous thing to say that this is not enforceable, because in no way does it change the select board's ability to control the warrant.
In fact, I believe
it requires that the finance committee render an opinion, which is what we're hired to do, elected to do.
If the finance committee refused to render an opinion, I believe it would be very easy for the select board to use, so the select board's counsel to go to court and create an injunction to require us, or to get a waiver to that aspect of the bylaws if we were really failing to do it, to force us to create a vote. But the finance committee certainly does not have the remedy in reverse. So, and I would also say that we have seen in the past that actually, not to impugn anybody, but it has been the select board that has worked stridently to work around the town meeting and the finance committee. So I take significant objection to the not only the wording that you used about how we would work around and we could use this to basically create a veto for ourselves, but also that this is even that's unenforceable. So we'll move on, but that is a very, very significant change that you made.
All right. Well, let me quickly say that in all the review of bylaws of scores of towns, I've not seen that kind of language for the.
Sam, I'm really gonna.
We'll take a look at it.
Okay. If I can also ask, look, guys, I understand that you did a lot of work and you looked at comparable towns, and that's important. We want to know what other people are doing, but honest to God, I really don't care what other towns are doing. Other towns aren't on a fully funded OPEB schedule. Other towns were making cost cuts left and right when COVID hit. I mean, we're talking about Holliston, what is best for Holliston, and trying to figure out, the few things that can be improved upon and how we can get there. So saying other towns don't have this language, other towns, as we pointed out, don't have the elected FinComs. So, we're not other towns. Let's figure out what Holliston needs. Okay, moving on. So one thing that you omitted, which I think maybe it is an omission, and I mean this in all sincerity, is we do need to change the language for the Finance Committee's prohibition on serving on other boards. And I don't mean serving like the Finance Committee would serve on any other board with a budget, but the language that is written right now would actually preclude us from serving on the Capital Committee. that you explicitly stated you want the finance committee to be a member of. And I would suggest some sort of language around the fact that, a non-operating budgetary board or something, you can figure it out, but I certainly don't mean that we should be able to serve on, on the board of assessors or on the school committee or anything like that. And I certainly don't want it, but, in the past, we haven't been able to serve on the tuition-free full-day kindergarten committee that was formed and, other sort of ad hoc committees that it would be helpful, and let alone the capital committee that you're looking to create.
Look at that.
Yep. Article 46 in the financial procedures, section 21 mentions consultation with the finance committee on the budget message. But then section 22.2, when the actual budget message is discussed, it does not include the finance committee there. I'm not sure if that's an omission or if it was purposely done. But not only do I think that the finance committee should actually be in charge of the message, but even there does seem to be some sort of discrepancy.
Well,
if the town is,
let me say, it was intentional for the town administrator to be responsible for the budget message after consulting with the finance committee, since based on our recommendations, the town administrator would be much more responsible for the development of the budget. So it would make sense.
Okay. If the town administrator is holding hearings with all departments, are these going to be open meetings to the public?
Yes, I can't imagine they wouldn't be.
Well, if the town administrator is sitting down with the town accountant to have a hearing with the town accountant, that would not necessarily be an open meeting, unless we're going to claim that it is. And then is it envisioned? I couldn't totally tell because the language is a little bit weird as far as these are the hearing mentioned and things like that. Is it your envisionment that the different departments would present to the select board and the finance committee as well, or the finance committee would simply review all budgets at one open hearing?
I think that what we're envisioning by the article is that the town administrator would prepare the budget in working, consulting with the finance committee, but prepare the budget, submit it to the select board. Mm-hmm. Board would have time to review it and then act on it, adopt it, and then send it to the finance committee. So the finance committee wouldn't be responsible for, developing the budget. It would be responsible for, its primary responsibility is the review and then the...
Right, no, but when we're reviewing the budgets, right now we talk with all the department heads, the departments in town, right? Some of them are prepared and now given by Travis because we have now someone that actually does understand, budgeting. But also when we meet with independent boards, they send a representative and we get a presentation from them on what their request is. Is that, it just wasn't clear. Is that sort of something that you would envision not needing anymore and we just hold one open hearing?
Are you talking about the 4.2?
What?
Are you talking about 4.2 public hearing?
That's the public hearing, yeah.
I guess what we're proposing is that the town administrator prepares the budget, submits it to the select board. The select board acts on it, sends it to the finance committee. Then the finance committee can adopt whatever process it chooses, but it won't be meet on Monday with a department head, and then the same department head meets with, the FinCom on Tuesday. There would be a process that would be completed in terms of the select board approving the budget. Then it goes to the finance committee for whatever steps it chooses to follow in terms of its review.
Okay, well, we can discuss that, but that creates some problems because certainly discussing with the people that are requesting the money is a very important part of our diligence and oversight process. So let's see. What was the rationale for only allowing the finance committee to request public information rather than all information as is currently in the bylaws?
Actually, we've heard you've had concerns about that, and we've looked at several other town bylaws with the finance committee since then, and really don't see public that much. We do see other language that we might substitute it for, but we're going to change that.
Okay, it's very important that we have access and that we can request all information. Obviously, in executive session, if it's confidential or privileged information, But many times, whether it's contract negotiations, purchases of land, building, things like that, it is important that we are consulted and that we are, at least are able to give our advice and consent. So thank you.
Just remember what this report or series of bylaws is all about the budget process. It doesn't really go beyond the budget process.
Well, but that specific line has significant implications. I mean, I guess this is one of my concerns. I guess I would say about this one process is you're tackling one area of a much larger web. But anyway, I see Ken inviting me, so I'm going to continue on with my questions because I'm only.
I was going to say just a couple more minutes.
I'm only on 15 of 50. No, not really 50.
Write them down.
Well, I have them written down, but they're not in a manner that I can distribute because they have some words that I can't. Anyway. So one thing I would say is that the process is set up now, I believe, will strongly discourage collaboration between the select board, the finance committee, and the school committee, because the select board, by knowing that its budget goes to town meeting and is the budget that needs to be acted on by town meeting, is disincentivized to negotiate. And I think that is another big issue. And going into that, I guess I'd ask.
Wait a minute. That nothing is changing the fact that the finance committee reviews the budget and issues its report with recommendations.
No, that's not true, Sam. Not the way you've got that written. I'll tell you that right now.
Sam,
yes, it is.
You've got a lot of should listen to the finance committee, should talk to the finance committee, but you've left the decisions to the select board in there.
There's no shall and there's no ability.
That's right. Everything is, like you say, the finance committee can make a recommendation to the select board. It says right in there, the select board can basically ignore the recommendations.
And the select board can ignore them.
And our recourse is to be the first people to speak at town meeting. But that's that also can be cut off by the moderator. There's no requirement, that you're.
And everybody knows the challenge
to be much weaker in this.
Everyone knows that the challenge of making an amendment to something at town meeting. I mean, everyone knows that it's the force of what goes into town meeting. And as Ken says, you're subject to the moderator and to all different kinds of, all rules are on there. But let me ask you sort of a question. I'm trying to wrap up here.
Wrap it up, Dan.
Does it make sense to you that the same group that's spending 50% of the town budget should also be setting the revenue assumptions for the town?
I can't imagine it doing it any other way, frankly. If somebody's going to be responsible for preparing the budget, they need to be able to be responsible for both the operating expenditure side and the revenue side, so they know generally the amount of money that they.
Well, I'm not talking about knowing. I'm not talking about being involved in the process. I'm talking about being the ones that actually determine the amount of, because you know that there's a lot of sort of best estimates, right? Or numbers that can kind of be. I don't want to say
right?
Or manipulated, but they can be changed slightly and argued that is a reasonable number depending on different assumptions. And you can't really say that that's wrong necessarily. You can just say that you differ with that opinion. And so let me give you an example of something that I see that could happen here, and I think that everyone should be paying very close attention to this.
2 more minutes.
The way this is set up. First of all, you've got all the independent boards now reporting to their budgets to the town and administration. Travis, I hate, by the way, that your initials are TA and you're the TA. It really confuses the hell out of me. But anyway, you have independent elected boards who have responsibility to the people that elected them to argue and try to get the best for them as possible, right? But now they're being sort of subjugated to going through the town administrator and going through the then the select board, who may have alternative views of what they want to spend. And then on the side, you have the school committee, who I understand is a pass-through. But let me just say, so the select board sets its revenue assumptions and its guidelines, sends out its memo. The schools work diligently and they come to an agreement on what the schools are going to be able to afford to spend based upon all of that. But at the last minute, the select board realizes they're not going to be able to fully fund their initiative. And so at the last minute, after telling the schools there's no more money, they change their revenue assumptions to be able to fit their spending. And this is not totally out of the air, because there's a member of the select board who has said publicly on the air that they want to much more broadly marry up the sort of the goals of the select board with the budget assumptions, the revenue assumptions, and there were different words, but very clearly making that we want to model our revenue based upon what we want to spend. And that is why an independently elected finance committee setting these revenue assumptions, the guideline, clears the space and creates a much more even playing field for everybody. And there's no games, there's no toying around, we have a $1,500 budget, you can take it away really. I mean, I don't really care. I mean, it's not anything that we have no skin in this game one way or the other. And that is where the finance committee is so important to this town, and it's so important to the outcome of this process. And I'm going to wrap it up now with this because I still have other things, but and I appreciate the rest of the finance committee giving me this much time. But I'm very troubled by most of this, and I think that it will be a very negative thing for the town of Holliston and for our financial well-being going forward.
Okay, Mr. Murphy, you were next.
Yeah, I just have a couple follow-up questions, Sam, and the rest of the committee. Sam, you mentioned you foresee this having the select board basically present the budget to the FinCom, and my understanding is you don't expect the FinCom to actually go through the budget process we do now, where we're asking each department head to come before us and question them on their budgets.
No, I didn't say that. I said that that would come after the process was completed with the select board and their adoption of the budget. You would then have that budget to review, and if you feel you need to, have meetings with, department heads to understand the budget better and check revenue assumptions, you have full leeway to do that.
Okay. The other question I have is, you've made the analogy that the select board is the board of directors. I find that faulty, and the reason I find it faulty is I would say the town meeting is the board of directors. They have the voting, they have the power, and they make the recommendations. Really, the select board is more of a CEO, and part of the issue I have is similar to what Dan was saying. You have independent boards, including the school board and all the library trustees, the parks and recs, and the board of assessors, the board of health. All these boards, you're saying, well, they all now have to report into the select board, which is, in my thinking, is kind of flawed because all these are independently voted boards. So how can you reconcile that with me?
The fact that they're independently elected, I don't know why that should change the fact that they would present their budget to the town administrator, who would then compile the budget and present it to the select board to be then adopted or reviewed by the finance committee. Whether you're elected or appointed, I don't see the difference. If the town administrator is responsible for really preparing the full comprehensive operating budget and capital budget. I mean, this is the model that we've seen in.
Well, I'll get to that, because I have a question. I have an issue with the way you spoke about the model, because you're taking charters versus bylaws, which we'll get to in a second. What's your reasoning behind having the CapEx at the same time in the summer or the spring, as opposed to the way we're doing it now, which is mostly in the fall? What's the logic behind that?
Well, I'm not sure you're doing it mostly in the fall, so I'll ask.
Well, it's one-offs, and usually we've grown more in the past few years because we keep getting all these additional things. Well, we need to do it in the summer. But your budget presentation is saying, let's do it all in the spring. So the question is why, as opposed to having it the way we've been doing it, is having one-offs, but typically we do all the CapEx in the fall. What's the benefit of that versus leaving it the way it is?
Well, I think it's preparing a comprehensive budget, but
they're two separate things. One's an operating versus a CapEx.
Yeah, but you still have to prepare a capital budget for the ensuing year. I can't tell you how many towns where that is part of their operating budget, and the capital improvement program then becomes their 5-year plan, which could be dealt with in the fall. I think it's just calls for the planning of the budget for the spring, but in practicalities, in part, so you'll know what the full free cash number is, as has been the experience in Holliston for several years now. And Paul can talk about, if he Ken the analysis he undertook, but it has come out somewhat even. So there's even when it was supposed to be in the fall, there's been, as you mentioned, there's been a number of capital expenditures in the spring. So I don't know that in the end it's going to be all that different. It's just that the planning and budgeting would be for the spring in terms of when it's prepared.
Okay.
Paul LeBeau, if I could, just quickly.
Yep.
We did an analysis of the last 10 years appropriations at town meetings. And from a dollar standpoint, 50% of the capital spending has taken place in the spring and 50% of the spending has taken place in the fall. What we're proposing is that we have a holistic view of all the spending, both capital and operating, as part of the planning process in the spring, with the intention that most of it would be addressed in the spring. The town is in a good position now with a capital expenditure fund, good stabilization balance and so forth, that kind of planning can take place. But it does not in any way limit the ability of the town to address capital in the fall or postpone it from the spring to the fall, given any circumstances that may arise in any given year. The flexibility is still there.
Okay. That makes sense. I got to think about that. But the other question I have, and I just want to clarify because I haven't gone through all 15. Did you find charters or did you find bylaws? Was it all charters? And the reason I point out is the charter was different, as we know, and you guys spoke about, was the home rule petition versus what we have is still under the guise of the statutes and the bylaws, but mostly statutes. So versus a home rule petition, you're basically self-governing, and you have a lot more reasons. You have to codify a lot of things within the charter. So was everything you listed, all 15 towns, were they all have charters?
They did. We're not here suggesting a charter, but we're trying to take what we found in charters in many towns dealing with their budget development process and replicating that through a bylaw for Holliston.
But that's what I'm saying is part of the reason I'm guessing, and I could be wrong, not knowing the full understanding of what charters are and how it's done. But my guess is they needed to codify everything because the statutes don't matter anymore. So I'm just wondering, are we going overboard by trying to codify all this stuff? And
well, we're not codifying. We're basically recommending this to be established in bylaw.
So therefore, you're codifying it.
Well, yeah. I mean,
okay. So, but you just said no, we're not. But you are.
Well, but part of the problem is that in our discussion with town officials in our town, and Scott can talk about this. I mean, a number of them talk about how important it was to have the budget development process in a bylaw so that there was structure and discipline. And the problems when it's as it is in Holliston. I mean, we're 40 years behind where many other towns are. So, this is establishing through bylaw a process of budget development. There's no other way of doing it other than say, okay.
Well, you could do it through a policy. So rather than through a bylaw.
I'm sorry.
You could do it through a policy rather than through a bylaw.
No, I think, from what we have learned from other town officials, at least it's going to be a bylaw that, that has teeth to it, that, is approved by town meeting and therefore approved by the town for a process in developing the budget. Policy can change easily. Bylaws can change, but they're not as easy. And if you've got, all the provisions for, other financial issues, it ought to be the same in the bylaws for the budget development. I mean, not every town has this, but it's as a result of some of the factors that I mentioned earlier as to the challenges facing municipal government, it makes more sense. And I think that's we've all had our individual conversations with town managers, town administrators, and it has reinforced the importance of creating this as a bylaw.
I have another question off of this, just regarding the Article 3, the Select Board recommendations. Just curious, why are we keeping the power to appoint the police department and power to appoint fire department for the Board of Selectmen? It seems have you done a selection and review of other towns? Is that something they still report and appoint officers and special officers and fire department, firemen, the Board of Selectmen? And by the way, you should change that to Select Board.
On this issue, we're just trying to address the issue that the town administrator does have a role in the selection of the town or the fire chief and the police chief that isn't recognized in that section of the select board's article. And we wanted to make sure that it was. I mean, it's basically the town administrator's job to vet all the candidates and make the recommendations to the select board. That's missing from the fact that the special act is not included, so that's why it's there. We will, this is the first initiative in a 3-year effort, so we will go back and visit, for a lot of reasons, the town administrator special act, but it's also a bylaw, and look at ways that will more empower the town administrator, because when we approved the town administrator special act, it was fairly weak compared to what other town administrator authority was in other local towns. So that'll be another project that we will have to undertake.
Okay, that's it for me.
Okay, Michelle, you were next.
First of all, thank you for coming here and appearing before us. I want to make it clear that if I use terms like we, I don't mean the 7 of us. I mean a FinCom in general, because I realize that a bylaw outlives all of us. So I don't mean the 7 of us. I mean the Finance Committee in general. So I have notes that I've been making during Dan's talks. I'm sorry if it's kind of scattered. When we were talking about bond rating, we've heard that one of our reasons that our bond rating isn't higher is because we don't have a diversified tax base. I don't think anyone said it was because we didn't have a bylaw having to do with our fiscal procedure or anything like that. I don't think that was ever mentioned by any of the bond rating agencies. So I just wanted to put that out.
In fact, our fiscal oversight is cited as a positive.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
In fact, it's the other way around.
Talk about our strong financial management.
We get credit for what we're doing.
There's been no criticism of the Finance Committee in terms of what we're recommending.
Right, and that leads to my next question. I'm not doubting that we need even a bylaw that codifies a fiscal policy, but I want to know what's wrong with the one we have now. What's wrong with the procedures we have now codifying them?
Because, well, first of all, they're not in a bylaw, and that's creating conventions. Codified is.
Why can't we take what we have now?
Explain what you mean when you say codified.
The procedure that we follow now with what the Finance Committee does in conjunction with the town administrator and the select board, what we do exactly now, why couldn't we turn that into a bylaw?
Yeah, but that's just past practice. That doesn't have any weight. So
But it would if it was a bylaw.
Yeah, Sam, she's saying.
That's why we're recommending it be a bylaw, so that
No, you're not.
structure,
Sam,
discipline
if I
in
may
place.
interject. Her point is that you are suggesting a bylaw that changes the process we currently use. And there's nothing to stop you from producing a bylaw that mimics what we currently do.
If the
That
purpose
says the process is working, we're just going to codify it in a bylaw.
Yeah,
That's her point. And there's nothing to stop you from doing that. Your bylaw doesn't have to be the way it is right now.
Because what I've heard all night is we need a bylaw, we need a bylaw, we need a bylaw, but I haven't heard what's wrong with what we're doing, except that it isn't a bylaw.
Well, I guess the answer is that from all our work and research, we think there's a better way. And that's what we've recommended, that the full-time professionals, the treasurer, the accountant, the principal, the town administrator, that's your financial team. They then prepare the budget, and the finance committee plays an important role of the review recommendations.
Sam, that's not what you did. You moved a whole bunch of other budgets and departments underneath this process, which then filters through the select board. You didn't just empower the town administrator and our financial professionals. Exactly. You empowered the select board. This is a complete movement of the oversight responsibility and the budgeting responsibility from the finance committee to the select board, and that you just.
All right, let me just
let Michelle finish.
Okay. So I just wanted to say that this came up earlier. I was elected. I was on an elected board, then I was on an appointed board. Now I'm an elected board. When we were talking about elected versus appointed, there is a huge difference of who you're answerable to, a major difference. I was elected. I lost an election. I swore it was so traumatic. I swore I would never run for election again. I asked to be appointed. I did not like being answerable to 3 people. I decided I would rather risk losing another election and knowing that I was answerable to voters as opposed to 3 people. When you're appointed, you are answerable to the select board. You are answerable to those 3 people. You are not answerable to the elected registered voters in town. It is just a fact. I have lived it. I know it. An appointed finance committee is answerable to either the select board or the town administrator, whoever elects them. They are not answerable to the residents in town.
No, I disagree with you entirely.
I've lived it.
I've dealt with many towns. I know what I'm talking about.
Hey, Ken, if I may, it's about 2 minutes to 8. And I know we said we're going to go an hour.
Okay,
So
all right.
Right. I know we got started a little late, so I'm going to let it go 2 minutes, but I want to get it wrapped up.
I'm on vacation, so I just want to use my vacation wisely. That's all.
I have 2 questions. In your changes to the time of town meeting, it makes a reference to elected officials. And I wanted to know what that was.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. Could you say
Again?
When you change the bylaw about time of town meeting, it makes a reference to elected officials when you're talking about things on the ballot.
Right.
And for the purpose of electing officers and for the determination of all other matters, what does that reference to? What's that reference for the purpose of electing officers?
That's Paul LeBeau. It's the
Paul
annual.
can answer that better.
It's the annual town election.
It happens every year.
Right.
No, I know, but why is it having to do with town meeting?
Because the warrant for the spring town meeting currently includes all the articles that are going to be debated at spring town meeting, and then the list of officers who are going to be on the ballot at the annual town election. That happens every spring.
It's just a process.
Yeah, in fact, we changed the language. Currently, the language says that the warrant of the town meeting will be dissolved after the last article is considered. But if you dissolve the warrant at the end of the May town meeting, you're dissolving the warrant that includes the upcoming town election 2 weeks later. And so I used to argue with Jared Adams about that because he would get up at every town meeting and dissolve the warrant. And I said, no, you can't dissolve the warrant because the election's on the warrant. And he kept doing it.
Okay.
But that's why we're changing the language. It's really more of a technicality, but it is something that can be changed while we're there.
Okay, I figured it had something to do with the overrides too, and that's why it talks about fall town meeting not having a ballot.
No.
Anything to do with the ballot.
Under the state law, selectmen can call an election virtually at any point in time if they feel that it's necessary to consider an override.
Okay, all right, and then my last question, and this, I'm sorry, I'll try to hurry up, Scott, because this has to do with what Vin and Dan both said, and that's right now our process is we have liaisons to all of the departments, elected and appointed. We meet with them, and then they come in after they've voted on a budget. So if it's a department that's under the select board, like let's say fire, because I see Chief Cassidy is here. Fire meets with the select board votes on their budget. Chief Cassidy comes in and discusses his budget with us. The Board of Health votes on their own budget, then the Board of Health comes and discusses it with us. When they come and they meet with us, we don't care if they're elected or appointed. All we care about is that their budget has been voted. We discuss their budget with them. So everyone's on a level playing field. You know, it doesn't matter who is over them or not. But when if you get rid of that process, and then like the Board of Health or the planning board or library, if they have to meet with the select board, they're meeting with the select board along with people that are under the select board. It just seems like you're creating an uneven playing field. And I think that's what Dan and Ben could correct me if I'm wrong, if I misunderstood what they were saying. But it's like an uneven playing field because those boards have already met with the select board. The select board's already voted and approved their budget. And then they have to, those other elected boards then have to justify their already approved budgets to the select board. So it's like they have to re-justify their budgets.
I mean, I think the quick answer could be that, that's a process that really has to be worked out by the select board and the town administrator and these independently elected boards. It could be that, you know, they're just meeting with Travis as he's preparing the budget. And it's only the budgets that are under the auspices of the select board that actually meet with the select board. But in any case, the bottom, you know, at the end, the select board would approve a budget that then would go to the FinCom for your review and meetings, if you choose, with all these, you know, town officials. But yes, they would be defending a budget that the select board has already approved.
So Michelle, do you have any other questions?
Just one other one.
Okay, go ahead. I'm just trying to keep track of the time.
I just don't think that there's time in the timeline for us to meet with these departments when it gets to that 6.2 public hearing. Is that 6.2? Or the 5.2 public hearing? I don't think that there's enough time in the timeline left for us to meet with the departments.
Well, that's a public hearing. That section just says create a date for a public hearing. You can set the hearing as late as you like.
Well, it's early, but it would be premature anytime before then. It just seems like there isn't enough time for us to be meeting. It's like it's too late in the process.
Yeah.
And I'm done. I'll leave time and stop soon.
Yeah, it's extremely quick. You get too quick as I want to wrap this up. So.
Yep, and I promise these will be my least controversial points of the night. So that thing, not much. Just two things. So in here, the positions for the select on the capital planning committee for the select board, finance committee, schools, planning, everything. There stated to be 3-year terms chosen from amongst their ranks, right? But that needs to be sort of, in my opinion, should be tightened up a little bit, because if a member leaves the board, in theory, they're still serving on the capital board, even if they're, you know, lose an election or something. Maybe it should be that the finance committee, all these, you know, reappoint one member for a year term, you know, during their, you know, at their reorganization or something like that.
You're suggesting staggered, possibly something like that, just so there's not all three at the same time?
No, I just mean that if
the technicality of if you're appointing somebody from the FinCom whose term expires during the 3 years, they could be off the FinCom and on the capital committee.
Paul LeBeau, if I could quickly, the wording says that it's from its membership. So if someone steps off the select board or the finance committee and they were on the capital committee, they're no longer part of that board's membership.
Well, but I would say, Paul,
so it's incumbent upon that board to select a replacement.
Right.
But Bob, I'm not a lawyer. I know you are, but the selection from its membership is done. That member is now on the board. I just would think you'd want to clarify, because it's not, it doesn't say that your term expires when you leave the membership of the board. It says that the person shall be chosen for a 3-year term from the membership. So if you're a member when you're chosen.
Okay, if we can look at.
That's fine. Okay, is that?
Dan, if I could, you've got to take off your rose-colored glasses when you view the select board. Okay.
Okay, I will try very hard to take the rose-colored glasses off. It's been a problem for me. The last one, and again, it's
very last thing. Very
the one just, and I think this is a couple of examples, but it says that the town administrator shall serve as the chief financial officer of the town. Not disagreeing with that at all, but I would say that maybe add some language that in case the select board or somebody that we actually want to appoint a chief financial officer of the town at some point, that the chief financial officer be the town administrator by default, or otherwise appointed by the select board or something like that. Same with when it says, right? You hire it. When you hire it, or just so that you don't actually need to amend the bylaws if they go, because they want to also do the town administrator. And I would also say the same thing. There's the school, on the school committee, says that the business manager of the schools, it may, there may not always be a business manager. It may be some other title or something like that. You might just, want to say, or the chief financial officer appointed of the school, something like that.
Okay.
Yeah, that's been raised before, and we'll look at that. So thanks.
Okay. So I want to have one comment before, just an overarching comment, because we got started at 12 after because of so the one concern that I have, and this is the parting thing I'd want to leave the governance committee with, is you clearly indicated that you believe that the town administrator, as the full-time staff, should be responsible for budget preparation. The concern that I have, and I think the concern a lot of us have, and I'll let them speak for themselves, but is you've conflict rated the town administrator's job with the select board, right? I would propose that you could codify in the bylaws that the town administrator works exclusively with the finance committee on the budget for one simple reason, okay? For one simple reason. The finance committee, as Dan pointed out, is an elected board that has no direct oversight of money other than the $1,500 that we never use that pays for someone to take our minutes. We have no direct staff, no involvement in the town's finances in any other way, right? The problem that I think a lot of us have is you have associated what you've said is we want to give the town administrator responsibility. But what you've actually done is given the town administrator and the select board responsibility. And one of the things that I think personally makes Holliston great is that our finance committee is an independent elected oversight board that does not have a self-interest in the budget, okay? The minute you involve anybody, I'm not picking on the select board, I'm saying if you do this for the school committee or any other board, right? They have a vested self-interest in their own budgets. The select board oversees a huge amount of money. The school committee oversees a huge amount of money. What has worked well for this town is having independent oversight that is divorced from the people spending the money. We don't treat the select board any differently than we treat the school committee, the Board of Health, or any other board that comes before us, because it's not in our interests there's no self-interest on our part. So I would strongly encourage you to revisit this. And if you want to give the town administrator more budget authority, specify specifically that the town administrator for this budgetary role works exclusively with the finance committee on the budget, so that the select board, as a user of the funds, is subject to the exact same rules every other user of the funds is subject to. And that's just my comment. You can take it. You don't have to respond. But I'm saying that's the concern I have. These bylaw proposals are giving to someone who is spending a large amount of money control over everybody's money. And that is exactly, in my opinion, what our current bylaws and our current finance committee is set up to avoid. So that's why I said you have melded the TA with the select board to such a great extent that the TA is nothing more than an extension of the select board, and the select board oversees a huge amount of spending. And that to me is not good financial oversight, because they will always be acting in it. They will always have a self-interest, and I'm not saying they're up to evil, but avoid that possibility altogether, right? Avoid that possibility. Don't even assume that that they have to be virtuous, even if they're not virtuous, right? We saw at the federal level what happens when you have someone who is not virtuous in a position where you assume they would be virtuous. So why should we set up bylaws that put us in this position of relying on the virtuosity of a board that benefits and has a tremendous self-interest in the process? So anyway, I want to keep it to 8:12 because that's when we got started. So we're 1 minute early. So Scott, I apologize for going 11 minutes past, but
That's
you can
okay,
blame
Ken,
Sam
thanks.
because he was late. So but anyway, thank you guys for coming in, and we hope that between now and when we get to town meeting, if you are moving forward with these proposals, that you'll take our feedback to heart, and that you'll come talk to us. I will be willing to put you guys on the agenda anytime you want. So if you want to have further discussions, just let me know and I'll slot you in.
And I really do appreciate all your hard work, even if I disagree with some of your conclusions. But thank you for your hard work.
Thank you. You guys have been
Okay.
here a long time.
Let me just say, we thank you for the time, and Dan, if you want to, clean up your 50 issues and send it to us, that would be great.
I got through most of them. Maybe I'll send you an email and we can have a conversation online.
And I will point out for the record that I did my first sync up with Travis today on the budget for FY22. And unlike Paul, we are not we're off by more than $1 right now. So we're working on it.
All right, but I think before we leave, we as a committee need to sign off in terms of.
You can adjourn, yes. You can.
Adjourn.
Someone on your committee can
Motion to adjourn for the finance
governance
committee. It's a Scott.
Second. All right, Len,
Aye.
Paul,
Aye.
Tina,
Aye.
Scott. Is he
Aye.
with us still? Okay.
Yep.
Sam, aye. Okay, we're over and out, and thank you for your time.
Thanks, guys.
Just for the record, people at home, we are continuing with the finance committee meeting. That was a motion to adjourn for the governance committee.
Right.
So,
All right.
okay, so
Aye.
now we're running a little bit behind, but I think we'll be able to catch up because so first up, Ryan, we're only 10 minutes behind. So Ryan, you're on.
So good evening. I'm not sure if anyone's going to be screen sharing the budget or if you all have it in front of you. Or what.
You have it, Travis. Do you want to do it or you want me to do it?
If you can give me,
I mean, I've got it in front of me, but
if you can give me co-ops, I can do it.
Okay, I thought you had Harold. I'll give you control. Hold on, let me see. I got to see if, I don't know if, let me see.
Oh, I think Justin just gave it to me.
Okay, I was going to say, I wasn't sure if you even had given it to me, so.
All set? Everybody see that?
Yep, thanks.
the box went right over. Lovely. All right, so let's just go by line. So administrative salaries, we're keeping that level. That's what was the guidelines. Clerical salaries, it's just me in the department, so that's nothing. So we're keeping the personal services line. That's proposed to stay level. As far as professional services, so for FY21, we had 1050 appropriated. For FY22, we are requesting a slight increase. If you'll notice, we've already just about blown through that entire budget. Well, actually, we're $3 over for FY21. It's been a very busy year as far as development, and a lot of times what we're using that professional services budget is for reaching out to town council. So we've definitely had to reach out quite a bit this year. But if you look at the trends from the previous years, 1,200 seems about appropriate. If you're looking at 2019, 2020, 2018 was certainly higher, but it's about where it would be. Communications, so that's at 332 right now. Last year we proposed at 1,500 to address for the increased phone bill. That we're requesting to stay the same. Largely the communications budget is that phone bill, and it's also for sending out notices, permits, which a lot of those have to go out certified mail. And that also depends on the influx of applications we're getting. So while that was at 332 as of 12/31/20, as of the beginning of February, it's bumped up about 200 to about 550. So it does kind of ebb and flow. So I'm thinking keeping it level at 1,500, maybe the best course of action. For office supplies and educational supplies, last year we had eliminated the educational supplies line item. Looks like there was kept $100 in. That must have happened after the finance committee meeting. I'm not sure why that was there. But we had eliminated the educational supplies budget and encompassed that into the professional development budget. Largely, the educational supplies were going to be used for purchasing materials at conferences, which obviously aren't really happening this year, or last year, but hopefully they are happening this year. The $31 that's been expended out of educational supplies, I've confirmed and double checked that with Sharon. That was a misappropriation. That was meant to go into office supplies.
No, Ryan, I'll just point out for the record, when talking to us, you never use the word misappropriation.
Sorry.
Say it was a mistake, right?
Oh, geez, I just realized that is actually a very bad word to use, isn't it?
Yes.
Let's see. Mistaken allocation, is that a better word?
Well, you can say it was an accounting error that has to be clarified. But
Yes.
But don't worry about it. $31, we're okay.
It's a better word to use than the one I used. I'm sorry. So office supplies. So that was where the $31 has been expended so far. So that's roughly half of the $100 proposed. I had dropped that by 4 just to make a round number. $104 is kind of a silly number to be requesting as opposed to just a flat 100. I'm not sure if there was any real reason for that extra $4 last year, but that was last year. This is this year. Professional development, we've increased that by 27. Again, that's just to make a round number to make it $12.50. So that number was developed by counting up what the membership dues for myself and the 7 members of the Conservation Commission to the Massachusetts Association of Conservation Commissions, our annual dues, which we've received a notice saying those are not going to be changing, as well as attendance at the semi-annual conferences for myself and 2 members of the commission. Now, again, those have kind of flown out the window in the past year. Those conferences have been held virtually. So the price structure had changed, but hopefully we are looking for the fall conference, maybe to have those back in person and back on track. So that's why I'm requesting that be kept at where it is. So all in all, it's a 0.13% increase proposed in the budget from $54,436 to $54,509.
Okay. I see a couple of hands up, so let's go right to that. Mr. Maxwell.
Ryan, I think this is probably a pretty simple question for you to answer. I just saw at the bottom the $150,000 from the Mass Audubon. I remember talking about this in the past, but I can't remember if this was for a very specific project, if this was a grant, or if this was...
Yeah, so that $150,000, we received that as part of an agreement with Mass Audubon for finalizing the conservation restriction on the Warren Woods parcel on the Ashland line.
Thank you.
That had been in the works for like 5 years or so.
Yep.
Finally finalized and part of that agreement, that nice chunk of change.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Ben?
Thank you. I just have a couple questions. Purchase services, you mentioned the town council. My understanding is we have a set contract now and they're not billing us for specific things. We pay them in monthly fee and we can call them, probably not on a crazy basis, but so I don't know if we need to budget anything. I think that's a question.
That's a question for Travis, I think.
Yeah. So I think one of the things I mentioned, and if we remember, and I know it's a while back now, but, and I'm trying to think of another word, but I call it the ticky-tack stuff that the legal does a lot is, quite frankly, a lot of what the conservation does. When it comes to going to and filing things, those are things that are not within the flat fee. So if we're sending somebody, and generally speaking, that's mostly what Ryan is doing.
Okay.
He's not having, so the litigation, right, the real liability that we rolled in was really more on the planning side. They're the ones who have the larger cases. Ryan, knock on wood, has not been sued. Has not had the litigation on his side. So the savings aren't here, but it is because this is essentially the quote unquote ticky-tack stuff. We can come up with a better way to say that, but.
Nope, totally.
Right, a lot of times we're
fees.
I'm sorry.
Nope, perfect. I mean, it makes perfect sense. My wife's an attorney, so filing things, of course, you can't do anything now. It's all electronic, but sending somebody to court is a pain and it costs money. So I totally understand that. So I just wanted clarification from what Travis had mentioned previously. The other question I had is the revolving funds are increasing. What point, when do you use the funds? I mean, $25 isn't huge, but we have 102 in the wetlands bylaw revolving in the conservation trust through the Audubon one. We have 153. So seems like there's a lot of money there. What point do we say, oh, well, we got to use the money, or is it something we can't touch?
Right. So the wetlands protection revolving account and the wetlands bylaw revolving account, those are from our filing fees. Those are meant for anything and everything related to administering and enforcing the Wetlands Protection Act and the Holliston Wetlands Protection Bylaw. Generally, it's a good idea to have those kind of stockpiled, not for lack of a better term, in the case of litigation, which may be being addressed via the new contract with town council. But it is good to have that safety net. But we have been drawing a little bit of our communications budgets out of the bylaw revolving account. That's what accounts for that 176. So some of our mailing fees have been coming out of that. That was meant for during last fiscal year for there to be somewhat of a split there to bring it down to that 0% budget that was approved due to the COVID issues. So that's what those revolving accounts are for. And then as far as the Conservation Trust Fund, that's largely, well, almost entirely donation based. So you can see we don't actually get that much money in there. The revenues are really just interest, other than the elephant in the room of the $150,000 from Mass Audubon.
Okay. Was that related to that field that we purchased for the town?
I'm sorry?
With the farming area? Was that the 150 for that, or is this 150
No,
totally
that
different?
No. That was for off of Meadowbrook Lane, that area, Robert Road.
Okay.
There's a parcel up there. It used to be owned by Boston University or Northeastern University. I can't recall.
Okay.
I think it was Northeastern, but I'm not sure.
But that was as part of the agreement for Mass Audubon holding a conservation restriction on the parcel. So owned by the Conservation Commission, protected by Mass Audubon. Not entirely sure how they made money on that deal, but
Okay, anybody have any other questions?
like they paid to have extra responsibilities, but that decision was made before my time.
Okay, any other questions from the committee on Concom? I don't see any hands up. Okay, thank you, Ryan. And I will say on Dan's behalf, thank you for rounding. I'll tell you how the 104 ended up there. That was $100 that got rounded up twice in guidelines to $104. So Dan is Mr. Round Numbers, so he definitely appreciates that you did that. So,
great.
But thank you very much, and thank you for agreeing, for coming here a little later tonight to accommodate the governance committee.
Absolutely, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have a good evening.
And do you want me to, you do have Leslie here. Do you want me to just go right to?
Yep, go right to Leslie. And Leslie, now I saw Leslie join. I know she's not showing up on my screen. Let's see.
I am here.
I know you're here. I'm just looking for you in my gallery. There we go. Okay.
Oh, okay.
In the gallery view. Now, Leslie, can you do me one favor right from the beginning? Am I going to hear the word roof at all in this entire presentation?
You are not.
Okay, great. Good. See, I'm just kidding, Leslie. But I'm getting attacked for my attacks on the library building. So, okay, go ahead, Leslie.
So, would you like me to go line by line like we usually do?
You can, but I would just say this, right? If there's nothing to say about a line, I mean, you don't have to literally read every line. Like just point out the highlights of what's changing. We don't need to. Like your salary and things like that, where there's nothing to talk about, but like where you have the 7%, the minus 5%, those are the kinds of things, focus on just for your own sake, because we're starting late.
Okay. The first two administrative salaries, administrative assistant would be myself. No COLA, no steps. Same thing on our assistant director. Children's librarian, no COLA, but that would involve steps for her. On regular salaries, that's the library technicians. This is The reason that it's lower is because depending on what I have to fund in the regular budget, I either rely more heavily or less heavily on the state aid to libraries money. So this is a year when we will be relying much more heavily on it. So the cherry sheet estimate is 21.5 and change. So we'll be using all of that next year. So when I rely more heavily on the state aid and use more of it, there's less in the town budget. So that's what the reduction is there. The cataloger, 18 hours, non-benefited, that would be no COLA, has steps, head of circulation, no COLA, no steps, and longevity.
Okay, and just for the record, just for people who are listening at home, the whole no COLA thing is that we're going to apply COLAs later, just to make it clear. We're not saying everybody's getting nothing. That's being handled separately this year in the budget process. So, okay, continue.
Under operations, energy and utilities, level funded. Buildings and grounds maintenance, that other sheet that I gave you has got all the breakdown on it. Just a couple quick things. One, I left the cleaning of the carpets and the waxing of the floor out, put that at 0 because obviously we're getting new carpet in about 2 weeks. So we won't have to clean them. And under miscellaneous repairs, Travis had asked me to sit down with James and find out, kind of what he's planning and what sort of things we're looking at for next year. And he estimated he wanted to put me up to 5,000. So that's what I did. I know, he's looking at, the fact that we don't have any working thermostats. I have no heat in my office. I haven't had heat in there in years. So there's some stuff that I know that he's working on that he wants to make sure that we cover properly. Under custodial, this would be level funded. This is the cost to clean the building every month, and also a small amount of janitorial supplies. Under professional and technical, these would be things like the website, the movie license, TixKeeper, which allows you to book museum passes, WorldCat that we use for our cataloging, and Deep Freeze, which is the security on our public computers. And under communications, this would be our Minuteman membership and the telephone and a tiny bit of postage, about $100. And that's for, if we have to send somebody a bill because they have no email, it's that sort of thing. It's a very tiny amount. Under office supplies, I put this down $900. As we move from print materials and physical materials to electronic, part of the beauty of electronic is you don't have to replace parts. The case doesn't fall apart because there is no case. You don't have to repair anything. So we definitely do not need to have the full $3,900. We've got some stockpiles of things like DVD cases and stuff that we can keep working off of. So we really don't need anything in that area. Under books, 16% is required by the state in order to keep our certification. We normally have the extra $3,000 in there from the book lease, and we are asking for another $2,000. Electronic books are much more expensive than print books, way more expensive. I can buy a hardcover book, popular book with our discount, sometimes $13. Some of these ebooks are $85. It's a huge disparity. So we are asking for an extra $2,000 beyond what would help us keep our certification, just to help us meet that need at this time. So as the print and the non-print, meaning DVDs, CDs, audiobooks start to go away, we're buying more and more electronic, but it's more expensive. You're buying the rights to it, so it's a lot more expensive. The other thing I wanted to point out is that the schools now have access to the entire collection that Minuteman has and anything that Holliston buys in electronic books or audio or magazines, digital magazines. And so we made an agreement so that the schools can directly participate and use everything that the town pays for us. So this is really nice because now the schools have direct access to everything through the schools. Professional development, this would be the cost to pay for gas for us to go to Minuteman meetings. I put 0. I think Zoom is here to stay. I don't see this going away. The few times that we have gone to a conference or any kind of a convention of any sort, out of state, in state, the friends always pay for that. So that we've never had that in our budget anyway. I think Zoom is going to be here to stay for a long time. So I think that's pretty much it.
Yes, that's good. And I did double check, Leslie, to make sure you met the MAR. So that's
Yes.
that's always my first question, as you know.
We did. Yeah, I mean, that's super, super important. Yeah, we're in the clear on that.
So, okay, Mr. Maxwell, you had a question.
I have 3 questions. Leslie, thank you so much for your continued service to our town. I know my kids absolutely.
You're welcome.
The library, and I think it's a tremendous benefit and value that we bring to our community. I was looking at your spreadsheet that Travis probably uploaded to our Google Drive, and I appreciate the second page where you get into the building maintenance expenses. The detail is wonderful. I appreciate it. So my 3 questions: why ebooks? What's the benefit to that?
Why do we have ebooks?
Yeah, since they're more expensive, what's the benefit to buying?
Well, that's where the market's going, and it's going faster and faster. And COVID has given it kind of a shot in the arm, so to speak. The thing is, that's where the market is going. Every year, print drops, and the use of ebooks goes up, and they have lots and lots of, benefits. There's so much that you don't have to do with them, that you don't have to repair them, you don't have to shelve them, you don't have to go anywhere. And, with our building, it's possible our building will be adequate someday just because of ebooks, because we're warehousing a lot of print items that we won't anymore. But that's where the market is going, and it's going fast. We found out that, once new cars didn't come out with CD players anymore, the use of our audiobooks on CD is dropping fast, really fast. So I'm not buying very many. The increased cost is the publishers. It's the publishers.
Right.
Yeah.
With the ebooks, is there into the license, or do you pay that $85 and then we have it as long as that format works for?
Yes and no. It depends on the publisher.
It depends on the.
There are some publishers. I'll give you an example. David Baldacci's books are always 1 copy, 1 user, meaning you buy the copy and 1 person at a time gets to use it. And that's the way it is. HarperCollins does metered access. And when COVID took over, they started getting even more reasonable. I very often have the opportunity to pick to have access to a book for 12 months or 24 months. Sometimes I also can buy it outright. For a small library like us, me having the latest James Patterson for a year at a way cheaper price of like $47 is a great deal. So I frequently go for the metered access when I can. It depends on the publisher. It's all over the place. They have sales sometimes. Sometimes you get into the audio and there is no metered access at all. That's sort of a new thing now that they're offering some metered access. It's all over the place. It just depends on the publisher. Yeah. There's a little bit of resentment from publishers to the library. We're not doing anything we haven't done since, Alexander the Great had a library. Right. We're not doing anything new, but they kind of resent that we share things with people, and they're getting their money back by really a little bit of price gouging.
Yeah, I think they get their benefit back as we inspire new generations of readers. So it's kind of short-sighted of them to.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah.
We're not going to solve that problem here in our committee.
Exactly. The other thing I'll point out really quickly is Hoopla, which is one of the services that we use. That is really our only way to stream television and movies and music at the moment. So as those things disappear in physical copy, the streaming that we have access to is electronic, is digital.
So I wanted to come back to that. You said you pulled a little money out of regular salaries and you were going to use more state aid to.
Right. So it just depends on the guideline each year. You know, because we wanted to put the books up and because, you know, James had estimated our miscellaneous repairs a little bit higher, I'm going to have to use more of the state aid. And that's a revolving fund. So when we have money left over, we usually use it for something of, you know, of importance that we don't have to come to you for. I'll give you an example. Last year, we needed a new book drop, $4,500. We paid that out of our state aid. Some years I don't have anything left over, but we're really careful about the way we spend it. So you see how that sort of ebbs and flows.
Yeah. Is there anything we're not going to be able to fund because we're planning on using more of the state aid this year, or is it just?
I don't think so for this year because we just bought cameras out of it, but because it's a revolving fund, I will have some money left over from this year. So it kind of ebbs and flows. I do also have the Friends of the Library. They pay for all of our programming, so that they've earmarked their responsibilities in some other areas. So I will have some leftover money. Yeah.
And perfect segue to my third and final question. I appreciate your patience and the patience of my committee members, fellow committee members. How much is Friends of the Library donating?
Thousands. You know, they take care of all the programming. Like my budget is about $2,000. The children's budget is $3,000. The young adult budget's about $1,000. So right there, we're talking $5,000-6,000 just in programming. So they do a lot for us. If we need something in between that either Chris can't give us, say with computers or furniture or those kinds of things, they come through for those.
So it's approximately 6,000 right now?
No, it's more than that because before COVID, they were giving us $2,000 a year for movies. Okay. So it can be a lot. I would say it fluctuates somewhere between 8 and maybe 12,000 in that area. So, you know, not as much lately because of the pandemic, but yeah, they do a really nice job. And they sometimes buy us materials as well. They kicked in, about $4,000 last year so that we could do Hoopla. They are paying for Event Keeper, which allows people to sign up online for programs with us. So it's a lot. Yeah, they do quite a bit. And they have to fundraise that money. So
yeah,
they're really good.
Wonderful the work they're doing for our community too. So
they're really good.
You and when you see them, Carla, if you want to pass along the thanks to them, I greatly appreciate the work they're doing as well. Thank you.
You all set, Tim? Okay, Michelle was next, I believe.
I just wanted more information on the sharing with the schools.
There's a problem. There's a program called I think it's Soro, and Kelly at the high school librarian had come to us and told us about it, and said, with your permission, because the town purchased, you know, anything that we have access to, either that we bought directly or through our Minuteman membership, that they could have direct access to. Students have always been able to get a card with us and access all of that. And this came into play a lot during COVID because the kids were using Hoopla and Overdrive, which is Libby, a lot, you know, to be able to get books that they were remotely learning. But this takes away a barrier. They don't have to get a card from us. They can directly get it from the school. So, and it didn't cost any more, and it's a really nice program. And all we had to do was say, yeah, we want it. So it sort of does double duty. It just takes away that little extra barrier from the student. The student can directly access it through the schools. So all of those ebooks that we have, that the town has paid for one way or the other, now all the school students can have them as well. So it's a really nice program.
That's nice. Okay, that was my only question. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for being here.
You're welcome.
Okay, Vin?
Yeah, I just want to reiterate, thank you, Leslie, for all your hard work. And sorry to hear that you don't have a heat in your office. It's kind of
Well,
absurd.
it
That's
will
what
get
James
fixed.
is on the call.
I know. It's like for many years. I'm like, really? What?
I'm on the
But-
third floor, so I get a lot of heat
Okay.
rising. If it was really horrible, I would have somehow found a way to get it fixed. But James said to me, "We got to get this fixed." So we
Yeah.
will get this fixed. Yeah.
You have some good sweaters.
Yeah.
In light of that, I was looking at the energy and utilities, and I noticed what you're running, and I'm just concerned that you're running for the last 3 years an average of 18,560. So I'm just concerned by having it so low as 17,500. Are we going to end up biting ourselves, especially because I only see the gas and utilities going up. I mean, even our own
Right.
gas right now, I'm paying 20 cents, 30 cents more than I was 6 months ago.
I mean, I could bump that up. I mean, one of the reasons I left it where it was that we had a gas problem last year with the set point being too high at night, and we fixed that. So last year was higher than it should have been. And when I look at it this year, it's come back down where it's supposed to be. So I think we're probably okay.
Okay, are you sure? I'm just looking at the trend for the first 6 months of the year.
Yeah,
you ran
I mean, I certainly could. I certainly wouldn't be, against bumping it up 1,000 if you felt like that would work better.
Well, I'm just putting it as caveat. Is it something to consider rather than cutting yourself off and us having to borrow money from buildings and grounds? Because I know the building, with the exception of the roof, Ken, needs work. The roof, well, we'll get to there. And I know we put a lot of money just recently in there, but it just, I just don't want to have, if we need to, and I just am looking at the trends, and it's something I've spoken to Travis about, the cost of the fuels. I only see it going up, and I get concerned.
Yeah, should I bring this back to the trustees and have them vote to put it at 18.5?
Well, I'll leave it to the rest of the committee. I'm just pointing it out as something I'm concerned about.
Okay, go ahead. I think James wants to chime in on some of this, which probably relates to the heat loss. Go ahead, James.
Yeah, no, it's related to the utilities. So we negotiated electric rates for the town as well as natural gas rates for the town. And if you look at a number of the budgets on the utility side, we're actually forecasting it to be down because we've locked in some really good rates.
Okay.
So are we locked in through FY22?
Yes.
Good. Okay.
Hey. Oh, good.
So I would be comfortable with
Okay.
what Leslie is.
Perfect.
Okay. Mr. Alfred?
Yeah, I just want to say, since I'm not really allowed to get involved in this budget due to my extreme conflicts of interest, I just, since everyone is saying thank you to Leslie, I wanted to make sure that I echoed that as a.
Oh, so you're just jumping on the bandwagon, is what you're saying.
I just wanted to make sure that I thanked Leslie for all of her hard work and for doing everything that you've been doing.
Yes, and I appreciate it. And for the record, Leslie, I want to say this just because avoid any confusion about this, right? As well, and I've advocated for many years, we need a new library, right? So even though I talk about the old building and it being decrepit, and I'm not really a fan of it, and it's not right. I have talked to you several times over the years about looking at options for a new library. So just to be clear, in case people are getting the wrong impression that I don't like the library, it's not the library I don't like, it's the building I don't like.
Ken loves the library as an entity, just not the building.
That's right. So
you'll have to tell that to our patrons. They overwhelmingly do not want us to leave that building.
Well, look, it's the will of the people. But I'm just saying that that's just my opinion, right? So
is it ever? Yeah.
Okay.
I should mention too that I forgot to mention. Same hours next year, regular schedule, no change in that at all. So I just wanted to say that.
Okay, Sue.
Yep, I would echo what everybody said, Leslie. But my question actually is, we had done some exploring of the building next door. And has that died? Is that still a possibility?
It did. The selectmen, when COVID came along last spring, the selectmen decided the financial picture was just too iffy. And told us that they just didn't feel like they could take that on at that time. So it died at that time. It remained for sale until this past December, and it's been purchased by a dental practice in town. So it's been sold, yeah. But that was something that the selectmen were looking at, but they felt like that COVID had made the financial picture so iffy that they didn't feel like they could commit to that and took it off the table altogether. But it has.
And I also think there were questions about the pricing too. So I mean.
Yeah.
But based on what, I guess, based on the consultants that we hired, a year plus ago, there was a need, I guess, that they had suggested for the town to expand the space. So is that, I guess, still something we are looking at, or?
Well, I mean, I don't see how we can at this point. I mean, the two adjacent properties sold almost in the same month. The old TD Bank is sold, and the property next door, which was owned by Gene Crowley, recently sold to Jensen Sheehan. So there's no adjacent property to the library that isn't in private hands. Now, I'm sure that could change at some point, a long time in the future, but right now there's no place to go. If you remember, when you looked at her plan, she had kind of like, a plan if the town bought TD Bank, and she had kind of a plan if they could expand in the other direction, and she had a plan if nothing changed, how to work internally. And when we were closed between March and the end of May, myself, the children's librarian, the assistant director, we were there every day, and we put into reality everything that she had put out for us under the if nothing changes scenario. So we did the collections, we increased the play area, a place for a caregiver or a parent to sit with a child. We did a whole load of stuff, and we did a nice job within the limits of what we could do. And I think, we took that part of her plan and we used that time wisely to put it into force. Now, as the ebooks take over more and more, we may find that there are areas that are now warehousing books that could become study areas or programming areas. So that's what I'm sort of thinking that probably is a realistic idea for the future at this point, unless our patrons change their minds completely and say, yeah, we want a new library somewhere else. They were overwhelmingly not in favor of that in the survey last year.
Perfect. That's super helpful. Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Alfred, you had another comment?
Yeah, sorry. So this is actually a question. What about was the theoretical purchase price of the building? What were they asking?
They were asking for $650,000, and it sold for $540,000.
540. So at the risk of the chair yelling at me, I would just like to point out to the public and to anyone that's still on this call that this is an exact example of the issues that I have with the operating budget going to the select board. With the capital all going through the select board and the warrant articles all going through the select board, in order to buy this building, we needed to have the select board's approval to put it on the warrant to go to seek town meeting approval. Last year, the select board determined that was not the way that they wanted to go. That with COVID and everything, that it was more important that they look at other things. In the interim, during this time, we spent far more than that on other projects in town. That studies and other priorities of the select board, and whether there was the right decision or not, I'm not debating this, but it was not a lack of having the money that prevented us from going forward with it. It was a decision by the select board that they would rather spend that money or money elsewhere and not pursue this option. That may be the right decision, and it may not. I'm not making a judgment call about that, but it was their priorities was to do other things with money that we had that could have gone to buying this building had it been something that the town decided and the library decided that that's what it wanted. And this is exactly why it's very important, in my opinion, based on all of the other things, to keep the operating budget as far removed from these conflicts as possible. Thank you for indulging me.
Okay. Yeah, and yes, I mean there's a complicated history there in terms of, remember that was under a prior town administrator too. I think that was less involved, things like that. So yeah, but it is what it is, right? We've got to move on from that. So although I will point out that you said it sold for $540,000, Leslie.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I went on the tour of that building just as kind of historical, anecdote. I went to see the building when the trustees were walking through the building, and I think there was concern about the price, but it's one of these things where I sit there and I say, there was this, it is what it is, but at the same time, like anybody looking at a property could have said, this is what we think this property is worth. Now, I'm not talking about the select board in this case. I'm just saying that this was a thing where everybody was fixated on the 650, and it might have been, there might have been a discussion. Again, I think it would be different now with a new town administrator, a discussion of what do we think this thing is worth and what should we make an offer at that level or something like that. And that was never pursued by our prior town administrator or the select board. And I think that's when you hear that it sold for 110 less, that might have changed the equation. If we had known that we could have gotten it for $100,000 less.
And Ken, to your point, as a trustee, the allure to that building is that they own all the parking behind the library. It's not just the,
yeah.
And I mean, what is done, but they own all the parking, which is a whole different cost value added.
Yes, and that was the whole discussion, right? That when we were walking through the building, I had asked for that information, and the town administrator back then never got it to me because the realtor, you were on that you were there, right? Weren't you, Carla? Yeah, I remember seeing you there.
Sure.
So when we walked through, I had questions of the realtor. I asked about the parking, what the specific delineation of the property line was, things like that, because they just kind of had a sketch there and said this is what it was. And to your point, that's why I said that I think there was agreement that the price they were asking for was probably high, but there was never a discussion. And again, I'm not trying to throw Jeff under the bus, but I think that was a large part of it, was that you didn't have somebody that was driving that from that level to say, what do we think this is worth? We never even had that conversation, right? It was shut down and then we moved on. And I think that it's entirely possible we might have said it was worth 100,000 less, put in an offer at 550 and gotten it accepted, and then we wouldn't be having this discussion. And I'd be feeling much better about staying in that building because I'd say now we have a property that could make the library work. So anyway, it is what it is. It's water under the bridge, but I do think that it does point to some of the need for the independent oversight. So, okay, anybody have any other questions for Leslie concerning the budget or the trustee for that matter, since she's here? Okay, and we'll move on. Good. See, now we caught up. We caught up with Ryan, and now we're a little bit ahead of schedule. So we're going to get you out of here fast, Travis. So thank you very much, Leslie, and thank you, Carla.
You're welcome.
You're welcome.
Okay, so Travis, I think you're it, right, for the rest of the night?
I have James Keese with me. So the only thought here would be I've talked to the liaisons for the facilities and the public buildings budget, but I don't think I've really introduced the topic fully to the group yet. And so the public buildings budget, I think I'll start with, if you're okay with that. Obviously, I'm speaking to the chair, but to anybody. But the public buildings budget sort of would be broken into three categories under this proposal. The majority goes to the facilities management budget, which didn't exist 2 budget cycles ago. A few of the IT-related lines go to information technology, which I put in your shared folder, but you don't review for a couple more weeks. And then one line was sort of the outlier. And I think the best spot it would appear to go to the select board. So if you don't mind, I'll start with public buildings and then go to those other two. The wastewater treatment. Yeah, I will pull them up. And the wastewater treatment plan we'll do at the end is sort of by itself.
Yeah, and I have some questions about that, so we'll want to spend a little more time on the wastewater treatment.
Okay, so if I just get to starting with the public buildings. All right, so this is the budget. As I said, I'm proposing to disband it entirely. It's acted as sort of a catch-all, which I think is helpful. But at the same point, I think now that we have a facilities management budget, it would make sense, rather than moving one particular line or two, to sort of disband the entire thing. So it's color-coded. Just to sort of show everything that's in blue would be moving to the facilities management budget. Everything in green would go to the IT budget. And then this orange-ish color goes to the select board's budget. The reason being the Marshall Street is now, after town meeting approval, sort of under the under the view of the select board as related to the solar. This used to be a Board of Health related item that eventually got into this sort of catch-all budget, but I think the final resting place under this proposal would be the select board. And as I've discussed with the chair previously, the hope would be once we get through the end of this solar project, I can engage with Mass DEP to see if this entire line can go away. But I do not see that happening in FY22. So again, we'll essentially have all of these conversations in these individual budgets, but I just wanted to sort of go through them high level here. The facilities, electricity and natural gas for 3 town buildings were captured in this budget. All other budgets for every other budget that has a facility under it, so library, the COA, police, fire, DPW, would have the energy and utilities in it. This budget was, in the public buildings, capturing energy and utilities for the town hall, 1750, and the golf course. Again, we'll get into it in the facilities management budget, but this would stay. The reason is that these are the ones that don't go into a particular departmental budget. All of them are projected to decrease in FY22, and James Keys can get into the rate lock that he has on both electricity and natural gas. Contractual services is a line that had been phased out. This was this line here, grounds and building maintenance. Again, each department that has a structure or has grounds or building to maintain has their own line, and what was requested was that they all talk to James before they put forth their budget request this year to make sure that he has an eye on all of them. The reason this 102 is in yellow is that the public buildings budget at the beginning of the year was $52,000 for this. You can see the history was always above $52,000, but really in some of these years, the budget was actually in the $30,000 range and had been increased. The 102 is the net of the original appropriation for FY21 plus $50,000 in Article 1 of the supplemental appropriation at December town meeting. And so James will get into his request. But so this was going to be really the crux of moving from creating a facilities manager budget. And then at that point, sitting down with Sharon and James and Chris Mayo sort of said, is it possible that this budget is just not needed? The other ones that will go to James would be custodial services, and he can get into the crux of this line is COVID based. So I would wait for him to have that conversation. Communications would be a combination of what was in here, which is the alarm system and line necessary for the elevators, town hall, 1750. And then repair and supplies would also be one that would essentially be joined from what was in public buildings and what would be in facilities. Chris Mayo was comfortable with these, and he has the numbers and would get into them. But the postage machine is what is in town hall. Each department that uses it does punch in their own code. It gets billed separately. This is what gets captured in the catch-all budget. The copy machine service contract, again, he's the one sort of overseeing it, would be the only one questioning it. So it being under his purview certainly makes sense. And the computer license, Munis and Web, the website, again, is under Chris's purview. Munis is less under Chris's purview. The contract is reviewed by Mary, Sharon, and myself, but it does not hit one department, right? It's our accounting platform. It is our HR platform. It does all of our payroll. So it's really a town-wide tech platform that sort of sits better in Chris's budget if there isn't this catch-all budget here. And so he is comfortable with this, and he would go into that number. So I'll just stop right there and just ask any questions if anybody's unclear. Essentially, as we look at the facilities budget, all of these blue lines will be in there, and James will explain the 22 requests for them. The IT would be under Chris's, and then the select board one I will review with that budget. But if there's any questions on the disbanding of public buildings.
Yeah, and I'll just add 2 things, and then I'll get to the questions. For those of you who may not have been on the committee long enough or don't remember, the Marshall Street testing is the administrative consent order that was ordered we negotiated with the DEP back in like 2008 or something like that. Basically, there was a time at which the DEP felt the town had not been doing the testing we were required to do at the site. So they penalized us, and one of the results of the penalty was this administrative consent order that ordered us to do more frequent testing. And that was supposed to last for some time period until, basically they're convinced that we're doing the job right. And, the time goes by on the landfill, and then we can cut it down to the more routine testing. So with the solar work going on there, Travis is this is what we had discussed earlier, his intent is to raise the issue with the DEP after the solar field goes on there, saying, can we now cut back to normal testing? We have the testing things. And if they do that, then we don't need to spend this extra money on testing. And the other thing was, this is for you, Travis, the golf course. The one thing that I was thinking about with this was, we didn't, for many years, this was absorbed by the public buildings budget because the golf course basically had no money because they had spent, they were paying off their debt, right? Should we consider taking the golf course utilities and putting that back in what is now the golf course? We used to call it the golf course capital fund, but then we changed it because it's not just capital. Yeah. But that's just a kind of an asterisk for you to note for following up on later. No, the other two, the reason they were in here is because they're shared facilities.
Yeah, can I just make one point on that? And we can get into it with James's budget as well. But if you look at the expended year to date here for FY21, the reason for this, we're actually not trending. We're actually not trending as it would appear, which is over the past history. The reason is that we get by contract from the restaurant part of the bill. So the money comes in from them and it offsets this. And the only reason this is high right now is that we're behind on reconciling that with accounting. So the money's actually come in from them. This would be after the time the chair and capture this, they would be offset and reduced. So they are actually paying towards that. What you would be proposing is potentially using the revolving fund to then capture the rest and taking it out of tax support. I think we could absolutely have that conversation, but I just want to make the point that they are contributing to the energy costs of the building.
Okay. Yeah. Well, as I said, I was just thinking from an accounting perspective, is that something we want to stick in the golf course account because that is exclusively their expense. So, So anyway, discussion for another time. Okay, Mr. Murphy, you had a question.
That was exactly what my question was. Why don't we just move it over to the golf course rather than keep it under our the operating budgets?
Okay. Okay, Mr. Whitaker, you had a question?
Yeah, we have a line in here under the postage machine. This would be a separate postage machine from the one we spoke about the elections or whatever that was. I don't remember what department it was, but
we'll talk about Mary's budget. The treasurer, the way it works right now, with the expended part is when the bills come in for the postage meter, Mary gets the bill and pays it. And then she works with Sharon to do the chargebacks to the departments that actually spent the money. So when we were reviewing the treasurer budget a week or two ago, or I guess 2 weeks ago, Mary had pointed out that her expended to date looked high because they hadn't done the chargeback yet for the postage. This is the cost for the machine, the rental of the machine.
Right, not for the postage, but for the machine.
Right.
It's a lease, yeah.
I got you. Okay, thank you.
The company's called Neo Post.
Not Pitney Bowes? Who was it? I thought Pitney Bowes had a monopoly on postage machines.
Neo Post, it's who I used at the state too, actually, now that I think about it.
Oh.
Stamps.com, no, just kidding. Okay, so any questions on this, then we'll move forward, understanding that he's going to show us budgets that have this split in it. So,
all right.
Okay, go ahead, Travis.
All right, so then let me just start with the one. So the only line that moves to select board, let me just start there. And so you have this full budget in your packet, just to sort of explain why there's two different numbers. One, this view on page 3 includes what we did at town meeting, which was putting in money for legal and putting in extra money for the temporary part-time. If you view page 4, I don't have those amounts in there. So, it removes it. So just so you can see the year over year, without those increases, we're looking at an 11% increase. And I'll talk about why. But if you look at it with what we did at town meeting, right, it's a slightly different view. But I just wanted to point that out. So let me look at the normal view that we've been looking elsewhere. All right. So just to clarify what happened here in FY21, I did not start at the beginning of the fiscal year. This was a salary that I did not end up with, and it was put in there for a number of reasons. One is that we were dealing with making sure we have coverage in my office. We're still looking for cover. We're still maintaining coverage in the office. And the way that this essentially worked out is to have extra capacity to move extra hours for the clerical part-time. So this was a 30-hour out of 35-hour position. This essentially gave us the ability to work at 35 hours. So we've been doing that through this fiscal year. And all I'm looking to do in FY22 is sort of codify that this is a 35-hour position. This is the full-time administrative staff assistant position. And then this is the current salary that I came in at. None of these have COLAs, as we discussed with all of the other budgets. And then this temp salary, again, is as we continue to try to maintain coverage in my office. We'd like to continue to do that for the next fiscal year. It has worked out well. It may not be the long-term plan, but it certainly is giving us what we need at the moment, which is to make sure, we're getting work in and through my office, and that we're answering the phones, which is, we're the sort of last line where people call when they don't know who to call. So I'll just move on. We can always come back again. The professional services, this is the one that sort of raises everything on the bottom, as you'll see. Again, the 53 was the original budget for FY21, and you can see that was never really enough. What we now have is the discussion that I brought to the Finance Committee and the Select Board before December town meeting, which was the flat fee for Tallerman. I think, just to reiterate, what we get with that is everything except for Labor Council. So we do use Brown and Feely for Labor Council. So if you look at the flat fee plus, again, there's few incidentals, but looking at the flat fee, we're at about $60,000 for Tallerman. Then factoring in what we do with Labor Council and the number of issues that we currently have outstanding, that is also included in there. Looking at the run rate for what we've been using them for. Again, we do not have an HR director, so the town has relied relatively heavily on Labor Council. I think to a certain extent, one thing would be to say, right, do we need an HR director? The other thing would be to say we certainly want to make sure that if we don't have one, we're using Labor Council, and that is protecting the town from liability. So I had never worked with Dan Brown and Kevin Feely before. I found them both to be very good, and I would envision using them throughout this fiscal year at the same rate. The other thing that had been in professional services previously had been things related to 9 Green Street. Those are the types of things that would get captured in here. That is not in my FY22 request, as 9 Green Street is now under a separate warrant article. And so 99.5 is what I'm projecting based on need and the new flat rate structure with Tallerman. This, again, is the line that moves over from the public buildings budget. This appropriation for FY21 was based on a projected increase in the use of the testing, which we're doing to maintain compliance with Mass DEP. I believe it will be under the former level that we were budgeting. But again, my hope beyond FY22 would be that we can remove this need substantially going forward, especially once we're through and have a completely different setup at Marshall Street after the solar project. Communications is actually, this could be impacted by one of the things in the governance committee's proposal is to not require us to post in a physical paper. Those are some of the things that impact this budget. And actually, if I understand it correctly, one of our town meetings, which would be the annual, we do not need to physically post in the paper. And Paul LeBeau could codify that, could fill in if he's still here. The annual town meeting, we do not have to post in the paper. The special town meeting, we do have to post in the paper. That one costs us money. The Holliston Reporter covers the annual, and we sort of put it out there, but we don't have to post in the legal section. Additionally, my cell phone is in here, and I think this is the correct level. Office supplies, I'm bumping up. As you see, I've already expended this, and I'm hoping my toner will last me for the rest of this year. Professional development, this is based on the fact that this budget does not include the ability of myself to be in the ICMA. So I am in the MMA, which is the Mass Municipal Association. I think the ICMA offers a lot of things that we can use as a town that I would be the member of, but would be able to bring to Holliston And so I have always been part of the GFOA, the Government Finance Officers Association. In my past roles, the ICMA for town administrators and managers is really the association that is going to bring a lot of sort of materials that I think would help the town and resources. So overall, this is the budget request that the select board approved, and I can take any questions.
Okay, Mr. Murphy.
Yeah, I just have a question. Can you explain the temp salaries again? You went over it quickly and I missed it. Like, why do we need to budget versus, do we have people not there or people on medical leave or something?
Yes.
Okay. So that's anticipating persons on medical leave for a little bit. Wow. Okay.
So we've used a former town employee has been helping us out on a limited basis. It is a retired person, so again, it's not a long-term liability. We think that is working pretty well to keep us operational, and we would look to do it again in 22.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions on the select board budget? Okay, I think that you've explained it. Now, one question I had, Travis, which I know you've told us before, but I just wanted to clarify. So of that 99.5 for the request, how much is the fixed fee part for the whole legal service? In other words, how much of that is known fixed fee right now for the expanded litigation service and all that?
So I have it at $5,000 a month, which is $60,000.
Okay, so it's $5,000 a month, okay.
Yeah, so the incidentals being significantly less than that. And then that would just exclude labor council and sort of the other miscellaneous things that we've generally had to capture through this line.
Okay. Okay, I think we're good. I'm just double checking. And I will point out, just for the record, that for anybody that thinks we're mean in some sense, right? This is a budget that's up, 50% in 3 years or 4 years or something like that. So we support all town departments equally. So anyway, okay. So that's good. And do you have just, go ahead. We don't need to talk about this anymore. So nobody's got any further questions, and move on to the next one.
I think Michelle's raising her hand.
Oh, okay. You're Adam, unmute Michelle.
So at what point do you decide a temporary salary becomes someone you hire permanent?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question.
Oh, at what point do you make a temporary person decide that that's a permanent position?
There would not be envisioning of this particular temporary position being permanent. It would only be as long as it's necessary.
Okay.
The person who's filling it is retired and helping out the town. It's not that it's looking to make it long term.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so go ahead and move on.
All right, so I will move to the facilities budget next, and James can take it away. If I can just move some things around on my screen. There's a lot going on when you're sharing the screen. Oops.
One more. Over one more tab.
All right, so James also provided you with quite a bit of write-up here. Let me scroll down, and if he can cover that.
And just for the record, James, we don't pay per word, so you can,
Okay, well, good.
All right, so let me just point out, sorry, one thing, James. Again, you have the view here. The 50,000 had been added at December town meeting. Here's the view sort of without it, but obviously it changes the impact. Sorry, go ahead, James.
Okay. So Travis, did we make adjustments on the custodial based off of the meeting last night? It doesn't appear to be, does it?
No. So, all right, let me just start very high level. And I've had this conversation a little bit with the chair of the finance committee, but I don't think any decisions have been made. One thing that sort of come up is a huge component of this custodial services is whether or not the town, which is the select board, the finance committee, and eventually town meeting, wants to assume within FY22 that some of the things that we're covering currently through CARES should be within the FY22 budget. So if you look at specifically this custodial services line, it actually comes out more to, and if you look at James's, you see the full breakout, but it comes more in the line of 13,000 than 48,000. So about 30,000 plus in here is associated with what James has calculated out to factor in 2 times a day high touch cleaning of certain facilities within this budget. if we want to assume that we would only do that under the auspices that COVID is still sort of a major issue, and we would then probably have the CARES funding or another round of CARES funding and not put it in this budget, that obviously changes the bottom line. I brought that up to the select board last night, and what their request was that I put together everything of all of the budgets and show it all on one sheet, which I intend to do. So I would say, James, at this moment, this was the budget that they approved. They did ask me to come back with that, but I would just go through all of the highlights that you have here.
Yeah, and the other thing I'd say just on the COVID side, Travis, we've talked about this before, but we obviously have to, from a budgeting standpoint, we have to be prepared to pay these costs. The question is how we want to make sure that they're singled out for reimbursement if there's more money available. So while it's good to have it broken out and say, okay, this is what we're going to have, one thing we might want to consider, and again, this might be a nightmare for Sharon, but for example, in a budget like this, do you want to have a second subline like a 52906 that says, COVID custodial, that separates out the additional monies you need for COVID?
Oh wait, Ken, don't we not want to budget for COVID at all in the budget? I mean, we want to.
No.
But as a separate line item.
That's gone. Okay, and the reason I say that is that restriction about the budgeting for COVID, that was meant because prior to the pandemic, the logic was if you budgeted for it before you knew there was a pandemic, we're not paying for it because you intended to pay for it.
But now
with this budget going forward, there's no such requirement, right? The government's not saying you can't budget for it. In fact, I'd argue the exact opposite, which is now, I could see where they'd say keep it separate, but you should budget for it because we're not going to guarantee we're going to get any more money, right? So you got to be able to be prepared for what you now know, which is you have to clean. So that's why I said the question becomes, do we just stick it in the budget and have a separate sheet that says, 30,000 of this line, or do we do something within the budget where we break it out separately in each budget and say, because COVID custodial, and then you go through the budget and say, okay, all these COVID lines, that makes your sheet, but then it gives you the ability to easily look at the budget and say, okay, there was 30,000 of non-COVID or whatever, 30,000 COVID, this much non-COVID. Again, it's really
much
an accounting
easier to
nightmare
track
for Sharon,
going forward. Absolutely.
I would just point out, really, that this one is the best example. Like some of them, like you think about what Leslie just talked about, right? The actual operations are changing, and COVID sort of pushed people towards ebooks more. Mm-hmm. This is a great example of COVID, very specific, that isn't changing operations. Like, I don't see us post-COVID doing 2 times a day high-touch surface cleaning, right? It is one that I can see absolutely going away. Whereas some of the other ones will actually change operations and will sort of come to the new normal, quote unquote. I don't think the new normal will have 2 times a day high-touch surface cleaning.
Yeah, well, I to your point, Travis, right? If a department changes their operations as a result of COVID, and then when COVID is back to quote unquote normal, when we're back to normal, they maintain some of those changes going forward because they found them to be beneficial or the town wanted them or whatever. That's different. I'm talking about the specific, when you're talking about things like CARES, where you're saying, what are you having to do above normal for COVID? Well, we got to clean twice a day. Or the school, again, this applies to the schools as well, right? They have to, have extra buses. They have to have, cleaning of their own. And those are the types of expenses where a part of me says we should break those out, because then if the government comes along and says we have money, we can immediately point to those lines and say, here's all our COVID money. And by the way, if you ask us right now, how much extra you need for COVID, we can just sum it right up. And again, I'm sure you have that in other forms, but I think it makes it easier to present to the town in some sense, because then you're not showing the town a number and saying, okay, well, it went up 308% because of COVID, when what you could do is show that the actual custodial services cost was increasing at some reasonable rate, but that there's now this additional 30,000 line that's for COVID cleaning.
We also don't know when exactly the COVID impact will end. I mean, I don't think anyone thinks it's going to be this year. So it's just be good to continue to sort of track this on a separate basis, assuming it's not some insane additional sort of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, so I don't want to cut off James. He can get into. I mean, the billing that we receive is very COVID specific, right? And he has that done by the cleaners. So we certainly, even if it wasn't in a separate line, and I can talk to Sharon about that, but I mean, he can always pull out the bills that are, that specifically for this purpose. But, I think as James goes through this budget, it's just one of the things I think we're going to want to talk about between now and the time that we get through all the budgets.
Yeah. Okay, James, go ahead.
All right. So I think we touched briefly with Leslie on the utilities piece. Back in, and don't quote me on the exact date, but I believe it was around December, maybe even November, negotiated electric rates for the entire town, for all municipal buildings as well as the schools. I worked it out with Keith for an 18-month program lock at a rate of electricity compared to Eversource, and savings about $85,000 for the 18-month term. Obviously, the schools are the biggest user of that electricity. The next is the water treatment facilities, and then, of course, the other municipal buildings in town. So this is what we estimated the electrical savings for Town Hall, $1,750, as well as the golf course. Most recently, we renegotiated the natural gas rates. We put in a lock just in time as the national gas rates, I think Vince just was mentioning it, skyrocketed. And so due to the more harsh winter that we're having. So the town locked in at a great rate. Again, for this one's for 12 months. The savings, just because the consumption isn't as high as the electrical, is about $10,000 over the course of that contract. And those numbers are reflected here. Getting into the big nut here on the building and grounds maintenance, and a lot of this is explained in the write-up that Travis gave you, but the big impacts are related to HVAC and specifically changing the filters in the equipment. And again, these are the buildings for Town Hall, 1750, and the golf course. Replacing those filters, we're running the blowers 24, or while the buildings are occupied. Even if the building isn't calling for heat or not, we're just circulating the air. Traditionally these filters were replaced twice a year in the spring and in the fall. Now we're doing them quarterly, and they're not cheap. And we estimate about $3,000 additionally per year per building. So I'm factoring in another $6,000. So if we take the 52 and we add on these add-ons that I'm going to go through, it gets us to the $90,000. Next, within my purview, and I've been working with Mark Frank, are the maintenance of the park structures. So we have a number of, park structures in town, and even the structures on the fields, like the fences and the dugouts. Right now, those are not really being maintained. I put in this budget an additional $6,000 to maintain these structures. A lot of it is just simple maintenance, painting areas that have been chipped to prevent rot, and replacing before they get even more severely damaged. There is a project that's going to be funded out of the Parks revolving account to rehab a couple of the buildings down at Stoddard Park. So once we do that, we want to make sure that we maintain them so we don't have to have significant repairs to these structures moving forward. Next is an additional $10,000 for what I'm calling large unplanned expenses. We had things at Town Hall where we had to add an additional circuits, had to add additional lighting. And then I also said for the fire systems, which I'll bring up in a moment, but we expect that there's going to be a need to repair some of the fire systems within these municipal buildings moving forward, primarily because a lot of them aren't even being looked at, which is kind of concerning. So that gets me to the next line, which is sort of annual system inspections. We have a program where certainly the chief is going through and looking at the communication equipment and some electronic systems within the buildings. The actual fire sprinkler systems in these buildings need annual inspections, and some of them aren't happening. I can't find any record of when the last time the fire sprinkler systems at Pinecrest were evaluated. And so my plan is to put a program in place to have annual inspections of these sprinkler systems within these buildings. I did get a quote for Pinecrest. It's about $3,500 annually. So if we add in Town Hall, $1,750, as well as Pinecrest, I'm putting additional $10,000 within in that budget line to cover those costs. And that's just for the inspections. And, you know, when they inspect something, they're going to likely find something. So that's where the additional repair would come out of that $10,000 from large unplanned expenses. So before I move on, do we want to talk about that? I know that was a lot before we move on the other lines, or should I go through everything else?
Well, Dan, you have your hand up, so I'll let you.
Yeah, so I got one question in the statement, James. You know, if you don't test, you don't find issues.
Yeah, this is true. until you really need it.
Until it breaks, and then it goes to the hospital, and then you know that it has COVID. Anyway, no, just the only question I have is of filters that you're doing. What do you know what is the MERV rating on those?
13s. They're doing the MERV 13s. And that's why it's so expensive.
Yep. Okay, that's good. Yep. That's the hospital or whatever, you know, that's the filter that gets all the good.
Yeah, it's the high grade one. It actually has a shelf life. You can't stockpile them because the static electricity in there dissipates over time. So you just got to buy them, you know, new right off the manufacturing line and install them. So.
Great. Thanks.
All right. If there's no questions, we'll move on. Facility manager position is getting a vehicle. We ordered that vehicle in December, and believe it or not, because of a computer chip shortage, because of all the computers that are being made for everyone working remotely, it's impacted the auto industry, and so the vehicle is held up in production waiting for computer chips. And so whenever it arrives, there's going to be maintenance associated with it. Hopefully it'll arrive before FY22, but if not, at least it will, we'll have the funds available to maintain it, wash it, and get it inspected. Related to custodial services, Travis touched on that. You know, we're not looking at increasing the annual spend for the actual cleaning of the buildings. This $36,000 is purely related to the high touch cleaning. As a side note, one of the things I will be doing before the end of this fiscal year is negotiating a contract with one cleaner for all the townwide buildings, negotiate leverage buy. I'm convinced we can get a much better deal by combining all of the cleaning for all the town buildings. But until then, we're going to stick with this $13,000 number. The cleaning here, this $36,000 is actually dropping the cleaning from twice a day. And this is high touch cleaning. And if any of you are not familiar with it, the Senior Center, Library, 1750, and Town Hall all go through a cleaning, a hand cleaning of all the high touch areas. So all the door handles, the handrails, the bathroom fixtures, all of that happens twice a day, and they're wiped down. We have a log, and that's very expensive. It's $54 per building per day. This proposal, what's in this budget is dropping that down to one time a day, and that brings it to apologize, I have to put my glasses on. $36 per day. So if we take those buildings at one cleaning per day, that gets us to roughly the $36,000. So again, we can decide if that remains in this budget or we put it in a separate COVID-related line. But if COVID weren't in the picture, this maintenance line would not change for FY22. If anything, we'll be spending less as I look to renegotiate the contracts for the town. On the communications, this is a combination of the communication lines for the elevators in town, specifically for Town Hall and I believe 1750, and also my cell phone. It's really a realignment of the numbers. This is a new, obviously a new budget. So we do see a savings when we've combined what would have been my cell phone and those communication lines for those elevators. The new line on here is a computer license for the Dude software, which I'm happy to say is up and running. They already produced some output related to capital planning, as well as using it to keep track and maintenance of the buildings and the particular assets within those buildings. Maybe at some point, if you're really interested, I can show everyone a demo. That license is up for renewal, expires on June 30th. Renewal starts July 1st, and it's $11,914. Next is office supplies. I do have an office in 1750 Washington Street. I have my own printer and computer and desk calendar and pens and things like that. So that's what the $150 is for. On the repairs and maintenance supplies, the bulk of that is used to supply the town hall with tissue papers and toilet papers and paper towels and those types of things, as well as the cleaners. I've added a little more into that for the fumicide that I use for the fogging of the town hall building, or for the various municipal buildings. That is about $36 per gallon. Usually go through about a gallon a month or so, depending how often we do the fogging. So that is included in this figure. And then lastly, under the professional development is $1,500. I'm taking courses with the MCPPO in terms of becoming a certified purchasing authority for the town, in terms of procuring services such as contractors and all the work that I've been doing. I've already taken one course. There are 2 additional courses to become certified. Those are $599 a piece. And then there is an association, the Massachusetts Facility Administrators Association, that I'm a member of. And the annual dues for that is $299 a year. That gets us roughly to the $1,500. So that is my budget. I mean, in the capital outlay, we can discuss if we want to put the Dude Solution software in there. Good news is that through the MIAA, we're able to get a grant to help offset, the development of that software. The costs of that software is in the $30,000 range. I don't have the exact numbers in front of me. And the grant was for $10,000, so we can use that to offset. So there will be a positive of $10,000 in that appropriation that was made for that software about a year ago. Well, actually be a year ago, a year in June. We should, capture that here in the capital outlay, but.
Yeah, let me just hop in there real quick, James. So the trick here, and the reason that the actual purchase of Dude Solutions isn't showing up is kind of an accounting issue. Sharon and I talked about it. The purchase of equipment was originally started in 20. It was encumbered and carried to 21 where it was made, but it's showing up in a different line, so it's not in here. But we can certainly show you what it cost. Then you can see the $10,000 credit that James was talking about from Maya. But just like we had when we talked about the building inspector budget, where the original capital outlay request for People GIS for them is now moving up into the computer license section. That's the same thing we're doing here with Dude, right? So it was previously purchased down here. It's just not showing up here because of more of a timing thing, but we can rectify that easily. And then now the ongoing annual cost is what James has up here, which is going to be an agreement that we have with them to maintain that system.
Any questions?
Nope. Okay, good. So what's next?
Right. So if you're good with that, then we will go to the
Should ask for more maybe in that groundings and building line, huh?
No. The more you ask for, the more you're going to.
Yeah, and so the only thing I would point out too, again, because it obviously looks in this view, especially without the $50,000 that was put in December, which you can see in this angle. We still have either way. It's interesting. It's an increase. Excuse me, but the way that I would also word this particular budget is that we are essentially establishing, right, a facilities management budget, which has been developed over time. But at the same point as sort of, as James was brought in mid-cycle, we had last budget cycle. This is really the first full budget cycle where we're saying this is a facilities management budget. And so that's the way that I view it. But obviously,
Yeah, no, and that's why I said I think that we were totally on board with that. We knew this was going to happen. So that's why I don't think you're getting any questions.
And so the wastewater treatment budget, obviously, there's also some write-up here, but James can get into most of it. He's been very involved in this particular facility. And one of
by choice.
One of the particular things that's on my radar is this line here. But James, if you want to just sort of start from the top and go through it.
Yeah, absolutely. So this particular plant is 20 years old. It is outdated in terms of its operation. It's called a FAST system. So it's called Fixed Activated Sludge Treatment System. So basically, the way it works is that the effluent and the waste comes out of the schools. It goes into these chambers, and there are these massive air blowers that run quite frequently to percolate the substance and further break it down through microbiological action. And so ultimately what gets pumped out into the leaching fields is basically water. And it's a little different than, say, a home septic system where, the water that is going into the ground is a little less refined, a little more raw. The advantage of this type of system is that, you're putting in, fresh, basically clean water into the ground. The negative side is that the system requires monitoring by the DEP. It's permitted, and the DEP requires that we have a third-party monitoring company do every day. They have to check the flow rate and the pH, what's going in and out of the plant, as well as monthly and a whole host of other, chemical analysis of the plant. And then that has to be reported and up to the DEP. We can't do that ourselves. You need to have a licensed person do that. So that's what this professional services line is. We currently work with a company called Whitewater. They sent us a notice about a month and a half ago that they no longer want to service this facility. I picked up the phone, gave them a call, and said, why? And basically, it boils down to that they're not making enough money. It's not a profitable plant for them.
Well, I will point out, James, that the obvious answer could have been that they're tired of our crap.
Yes, this is true. But in any case, I said, well, what is the reasonable number? So I had them. I spoke to them. They verbally gave me a new number, which is about 20,000 higher than what we're showing here. But I'm also receiving bids from other providers out there to do this monitoring service for us. I feel that we're going to need to raise this, and that's what you see the $9,000 for. We're certainly not going to pay the higher rate that Whitewater is suggesting, but as an industry, the expense of this type of treatment plant and the monitoring of it is going up, and so we need to prepare for that. And that's what the 75,000 is. I'm hopeful that we'll be well below that with the new provider, but that's what we're putting in for FY22. That's the biggest change here. One of the big things here, you see the energy and utilities. This plant uses a lot of electricity. Been working with the sustainability coordinator to see if we can get some sort of solar arrangement with this to help drive this down. But it really points to the fact that this is an inefficient plant. One of the things that Travis and I have spoken about is that potentially we could do a study or analysis of this plant and for modernization and efficiency upgrades. And it might be, the ROA on that might be quite beneficial. The other thing that this plant is, it's way oversized. It was originally built for the fly school, which is no longer there. And the other schools, certainly during this time, during COVID with the hybrid learning, the flow rates are way down. And so if we do any modernization of this plant, we'll want to look at, the revised flow rates going into this facility, because it really is oversized for what it's currently being used for, and certainly what it was designed for.
Okay.
So that's it.
Ben, you're up.
Yeah, I just have a question, and my understanding is it has to be effective, and this is Paul Saunier had mentioned it many moons ago. Part of the problem with the system is we do cyclical, and the schools aren't running in the summer, and the system doesn't work well when it's not running. So that's part of the problem when they designed it. Why we picked this system, who knows? But I mean, it sounds like it's something we really should do, especially since it's 20 years old. Is it near its end, or is it just at this point, because it's so inefficient, it's something we really should look at?
Well, there are multiple, we should definitely look at it. There's multiple factors. The biggest, and I don't want to get too graphic, but hey, Ken brought it up.
Yep.
The problem is kids don't poop in school. And so you need that biological matter to help break down all of the waste, basically. So what they're doing is they're adding a lot of nitrogen chemically to this plant to help break down what little is in there in terms of microbes. And then before it gets treated, they actually have to denitrify as well. So they're pumping it up to get all the activity, and then they have to pump it down again to get it to safe levels to take out to the leaching field. So, yeah, I mean, we definitely should look at this. And currently, this plant, A, being well oversized for the need, and B, the challenges with it being used not on a 24/7 basis, but based on a school schedule, does present some challenges.
Okay, Michelle?
I was on the Board of Health when that system was built, and it was built against the advice of an expert who was on the Board of Health and our health agent who was an expert. They both thought that it was the wrong system for a school where no one pooped and that wasn't used during the summer. They were both against that system, just so you know. And when it was trying to be, when it was brought online, it didn't work for probably close to a year. They had to put chicken food in. It was just a mess trying to get it to work. And we just sat back and no one was surprised.
So, okay, Mr. Maxwell.
James, I just wanted to take a moment to say, it's a little hard to get excited about wastewater treatment, but I do think you're doing a great job. You're bringing a good value to the town. And with the facilities budget where we saw the cost savings because we pre-purchased, and here where we're raising these questions and starting to debate them, I think this is good. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It's nice to hear.
Okay, and James, and I guess this is James and Travis, my comment would be, I heard the word study.
I know, and I tried not to use that word.
Yes.
I was thinking in my head, how can I say this?
What you have to say is we need to discuss the future of that facility. That's what you do, so discuss the future of the facility, right? But in any case, I think it is a question, if there is a feeling that its life is, again, I have no idea, maybe it's 50-year life, but if it's reaching the end of its life, then I think, especially if the costs are starting to, substantially increase, then we should start having that discussion about where this is going to head, or what the next thing is. And keep in mind, there's one tremendous advantage about it now, which is with Flag gone, you have the biggest leaching field in the world out there now. So you can.
That's right. Well, actually, it's an interesting system. There's 2/3 of the effluent goes to the outfield of Adams baseball field, and then a third of it goes all the way down past Placentino School. There's a field that's down there. So they literally pump from down at Placentino up to the plant into some tanks, pump from those tanks into the plant, and then pump back down. Yeah, it could use some work.
Yeah. So, okay. Any other questions on the wastewater treatment budget? Okay. Okay, that's good. I think that's it for tonight, right, Travis?
On the budgets, yeah.
Okay. So I know we went long tonight, and I appreciate everybody sticking around. The only reason, in case you're wondering why I didn't reschedule some of this, was because we really don't have, it was going to make a late night for another night. So I said we might as well just suck it up and get it done tonight. So so that we're not, you know, we get the late night part over right away. But does anybody have anything else they want to address? I'll skip, yeah, unless Travis, do you have any updates tonight, or do you want to just hold off till next week? Anything urgent?
If you don't mind, I just mentioned one thing. All the other updates can wait. But one of the things that'll come up next week, I believe it is next week, Youth and Family Services, and I know Sue has been involved as a liaison, so I don't think she'll be shocked by the one of the things they have coming up is maternity leave for the number 2 over there. And so a sort of temporary fix. They have outgoing interns that they like to bring back as temporary employees during that leave. The leave will not time perfectly with the fiscal year, which is just very inconvenient for us. You know, no, but there's some June impact. So you know, I think what Jackie will be discussing next week, and the reason I bring it up now is that you know, if anybody has a substantial problem with it. I would need to know now, just because I'm going to start the process of putting the actual apparatus in place to fill the position where 2 outgoing interns, one of them would get theoretically the temporary position. And, you know, there would be an impact in the June budget. And I don't think, based on the size of her budget, that she would probably be able to fill it entirely within the savings in her own budget. It may require, it won't be a substantial amount. The June impact would probably be 2,000 gross. She could probably cover some of that, but I just wanted to bring it up. And I don't know if Sue had anything else to add to it, but I want it on your radar now because I got to kind of put some things in motion. And then she can extrapolate on it next week.
Okay. Okay, Sue, go ahead.
Yeah, I didn't have anything to expand on what Travis said, but I actually had a question for Travis. I was reading that the select board approved the farmers market for the summer on Sundays. And will you at some point be bringing forward the cost estimates for that, for cleanup, oversight, police? I'm not sure all the costs that go into it, but I forget how many hours it was on Sundays, but I would assume that there would be some town cost additions, and I think it would be important for us to understand what those are.
Sure. So the idea would be the way that it has been pitched, that there would be no town costs, that the vendors would be paying. So the structure would be the town would be providing a license agreement for weekly events during a set period of time of the summer. For a 9 to 1 hour period on Sundays in the Blair Square area. The group that would be doing this would be collecting revenue from the vendors. That would be paid into police details, any type of cleanup, those types of things, all the questions that the select board asked for. So at this point, when you say that they approved it, technically what they said was, yes, they're on board with how it was pitched with, you know, he went through Lieutenant Larini with the auxiliary police sort of looking at the logistics. He has the 501c3 would be the community farm 501c3 with the fiduciary for it, and a number of other things in a business plan that were the questions. So the select board was satisfied with all the work that he did, which was a substantial amount of work, but the license agreement still needs to be put in place, which I'm working with MTC on before that could be finalized. So there's still more steps before everything's final, but I can certainly send to the group for your review the business plan, the sort of schematics that he put together, also with the Rail Trail Committee, Robert Wideneck. I can send you all that, and we can have that discussion next week if you'd like to sort of carve out some time for that.
I'd love to see what you have. That would be great. I mean, if next week is the right time, or if you need to pull together more information, that's fine too. I actually saw it in the Holliston Reporter, which is why I wanted to bring it up.
Absolutely.
I also think it's great. I just want to have they scoped out demand too, to make sure that they're going to have the revenue to pay for any costs that they might have. Though it did look like they were going to use auxiliary police, which would not have a cost, if I understand that correct, right? That's a volunteer.
Yeah, there's a minimal cost. Yeah, these auxiliary police is the time is volunteer. Yes.
Yeah.
We would have to look if it needed a police detail. Again, I mean, the license will have to be the thing that protects the town's interests. That's the section that I'm now working on. Once the select board sort of said, yes, we like what you brought to the town.
Right. My other thing is not really a finance committee matter, but just there is a liability too. Is we're starting this in the midst of COVID, and I just we're bringing in theory a group of people together and yeah,
we got to make sure we indemnify ourselves about somebody getting COVID from the farmer's market
at a very busy time on the rail trail during the day too. It's just it's bringing a ton of people together, and
I don't know if we need insurance to be looked at as well, just given additional car traffic coming into town to take advantage of it in a very sort of centralized area. So, and there's not a whole lot of ways to get around it very easily. So we just may want to look at that.
I think the logistics are going to be the key here. I mean, there are a lot of things like we've talked about. Again, it's not finance related, but I think just logistically, right? The cars, there's how do you make sure it doesn't impact the trail directly for people who just want to use the trail, that kind of thing. And, making sure that it all works. I think it's a good thing.
Potential cost too, but potential uptick cost.
I'll send you all that material that the select board was looking at. And then again, it's not done until the license is sort of done. So I'll put that in an email for you, and we can talk about it when the chair is ready.
And actually, what's really great, sorry, Michelle, is that there's now a sign right there to tell you that it's 0.2 miles to downtown. So you can, start really making sure that everyone can know exactly where downtown is, so they can go shopping after they, they go to the farmer's market. Without a sign, they wouldn't know.
No, but don't forget about the people need Board of Health permits.
Yes, that was also brought up as well. So actually, Mr. Blair, I think the last thing he said as he walked out of the room was on to the Board of Health. So yes, especially if there's anybody who's going to have brownies. Apparently that came up, that's processed food. That's a different, yeah. So that is also his.
Brownies, I'll be there.
What kind of brownies?
Yeah, that's what's going to be my question.
Exactly. Yeah.
I just want the chocolate ones.
They're going to be sold by the growers in town, right? Yeah.
Fortunately,
they are farmers, right? They're farming.
That.
They're farming, so I guess the brownies count as a farm.
Recreation.
Right.
Good synergy.
Okay. Anything else, Travis?
No, I just wanted to make sure I brought that to your attention.
Okay. Okay. Anybody else have any other matters they want to bring up before we wrap up for this evening? Okay, I hear none. So as I said, we'll be back to a more normal schedule next week. But for now, I'll entertain the motion, given that we're approaching 3 hours.
He's here.
What did you say, Michelle?
Yes, he's here. Do we get a COVID?
Oh, yes. Oh, that's true. Chief, do you want to give us a quick update? Here you go. Absolutely. Sorry, I apologize. I've just been a long night.
That's fine. I understand. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Since I was with the committee 2 weeks ago, the town has processed approximately $15,000 worth of invoices through CARES accounts. Those are largely for health surveillance. That would be our Board of Health outsources the public health surveillance through the Salmon VNA, cleaning and disinfecting of public buildings, and some of the temporary hires we've done to support the remote meetings. And we are currently on track to submit our quarterly report to ANF, which is due next Friday.
Good. Any questions for the chief? Oh, go ahead, Michelle.
So when we had COVID in my house, someone called from the States instead of Salmon VNA. Do you know how that's divided? I mean,
sure. So you probably got a call from someone at the CTC, and that really was a result of surge capacity. When someone in your household got the diagnosis, that was at a very high positive case rate, and so the town had the ability to let our contract nursing do some of the cases, but our contract nursing did not have the bandwidth to be able to handle. At one point, we had 203 active cases. So they did not have the ability to cover all of those cases. Therefore, when certain new cases came in through the Maven reporting system, there was the ability for those to be managed by the CTC. It all gets reported into the same reporting system through Maven. It was just a case of
was doing the surveillance.
Okay, because I asked the Board of Health how they'd done, and they said that they aren't the ones that are the gatekeepers.
Right.
But I asked if they paid, and they said no. So I thought I was happy that the town didn't have to pay for it.
Yeah, so CTC is a state initiative, and only the ones that we had control over. So we didn't have the ability to ask CTC to follow up on stuff. The ones that we really only have control over are Sam and VNA.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Okay. Anybody else have questions for the chief? I assume I'll ask my weekly question, which is we're good on PPE and all that still?
Oh, sure. Yeah, no, that was one of the areas I didn't mention, but we did spend about $75 on PPE in the last 2 weeks. But I've got plenty for the foreseeable future, especially with our numbers trending downward.
Okay, good. Okay, anything else for the chief?
Thanks, Chief.
Okay. Thank you, Chief. Thank you for sticking around this late. Okay, anybody have anything else? Now, I think I got everything now, right? I don't see. Okay, so if nobody has anything else, I'll entertain a motion.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Okay, thank you. That is not subject to debate, so we'll proceed to a vote. Mr. Maxwell?
Yes.
Ms. Zemer?
Yes.
Mr. Halford?
Yes.
Mr. Whitaker?
Yes.
Mr. Murphy?
Yes.
Ms. Nersessian?
Yes.
And I vote yes. That concludes the Tuesday, February 23rd meeting of the Finance Committee. Thank you for joining us this evening, especially if you've stuck around this long. But for now, we're done until next Tuesday. So, as I said, we're done for tonight. So thank you and good night.